Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. Today we are going to be taking a look at one of the most historic, impactful, potent moments, astrologically speaking, of our lifetimes and honestly even beyond. So what I'm referring to is this basket aspect pattern that is forming between the outer planets Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, as well as Jupiter, all at 4 degrees of their respective signs. This is unlike anything that we have seen before. The astrological research programs that a lot of astrologers use, they go back millennia. And a lot of us have researched looking for something like this, haven't been able to find anything like this configuration. So it's absolutely massive that we get to live to witness this. And it's also just such a sea change in the energy compared to how we've been dealing with the energy over the past decade plus. So all of these planets, Jupiter, Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune, they're all in air and fire signs. So these are very active, very engaged, very direct and inspired signs. Whereas in recent years, we've had the outer planets all in earth and water signs, which tend to be somewhat more passive. There tends to be a holding pattern. And I think this so reflects the energy that we've been working with versus that which we're coming into. So it has felt like we've just been kind of waiting for something to happen, waiting for this moment to arise, to create a huge amount of change in the world and in our own personal lives. And now not only do we have that active energy to work with all the outer planets having moved into these air and fire signs just in the past year or so, but we get them all kind of conspiring together, working together to create the most impact out of our own collective activity as possible. So I want to look at this from the broad perspective here. It's going to sound pretty cultural, pretty political, pretty global, pretty conceptual. And part of that is going to be because of the fact that we're working with outer planets. That's usually the lines along which they function. And I'm going to take this through then, not only the big picture of all the planets working together, but we'll also look at all 6 of these alignments, which are baked into this aspect configuration. We'll look at them individually so that you can see the component parts of what we're working with here and see why it's all coming together the way that it is. Then we're going to take this through sign by sign for horoscopes. I recommend checking out your rising sign, your sun sign, to see how this is going to be impacting you personally. So let's go ahead and get into it. On that kind of a personal level, I really look at this as a calling. I look at this as activating our charts in such a profound way that they're unlikely to be activated again in the future. So if you feel like you've been on the precipice of something, like you've been just kind of waiting for that calling to come through for some level of clarity, that's what a lot of this is going to be speaking to. Now, the horoscopes are going to help a lot with that because then I'm going to be able to point out what area of your life that's going to wind up speaking to. But across these super energetic, active signs, these very inspired signs, it's calling on a lot of us to make our mark, to make a very unique contribution to this moment. A lot of that is going to look like projects that we're working on, aspects of life that we're reaching for, that we're pushing ourselves for. Meeting the moment and the moment kind of coming together in such a way to support us in what it is that we're reaching for. One thing I definitely want to emphasize here is this is such a powerful kind of an alignment that we're going to be working with, but it does look very beneficent to me. It looks like it is incredibly helpful. It looks like it's something that is trying to give us a boost, trying to encourage us. Now, on a collective level, the way that this is likely to be felt is just this incredibly potent moment, especially around the end of July or the second half of July, when we have literally every one of these 6 alignments, which are incredibly rare in and of themselves, back to back, they're all happening. So late July is going to be a time to buckle up. It's going to be a time of major, powerful breakthroughs. It's likely going to be pointing to the spark of a lot of very historic developments that we're going to be seeing then unfold over the coming year plus. But this moment has the potential to create revolutions across the board, supported, I think, by a lot of divine intervention, a lot of divine guidance for these moments, a lot of world historical figures that just seem to be stepping up into this moment. So the people that we need in specific positions, pushing specific buttons, encouraging us, inspiring us to take the kind of collective action that we need to in order to get the world back on track, or get it on track for the first time in our lifetimes, right? Those people finding their ranks and getting aligned in that way. I think that this offers a huge opportunity, especially with a lot of the huge potency that comes from this alignment is the opposition between Jupiter and Pluto. This is the quote unquote hard aspect, or the very dynamic aspect that's triggering all of this off. But what we also then have is these flowing, cooperative, supportive aspects that are coming off of all of the placements as well. So for instance, Jupiter and Pluto, even though they're opposite to each other, they're making flowing aspects to Neptune. They're making flowing aspects to Uranus, and Neptune and Uranus are making flowing aspects to each other as well. But the potency of this moment offers a major opportunity to really forcefully address problems, offer solutions that are really optimistic, that are quite unique to the moment. The status quo really doesn't have the ability to survive this moment. The world is definitely going to be changed by what's kicking off in July of 2026. There's certainly every possibility and potential on the table here. And so I also want to emphasize that it's really important that we do guide this ourselves as well. Whoever is grasping on to this energy and pushing it forward is really likely to win the moment. The spurring on of the fire and air signs, these very active signs, and these planets, which all, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and Jupiter, they all encourage breaking or pushing beyond boundaries and restrictions, are certainly going to be too much for us to wind up remaining in the same spot as we are coming into July. A lot of this, as I mentioned, is going to be somewhat conceptual. It's going to be ideological. If we look back to major revolutionary moments in the past, for instance, the US Revolution, a lot of what was being worked with, certainly it was the actual institutions, it was the actual getting out and acting upon the moment, but so much of it was about ideas and narratives and what people believed in and what they believed that they could accomplish, which was utterly new and innovative in that moment. It's no wonder that two of these planets actually were where they are here. So Pluto was in Aquarius, Uranus was in Gemini as well in that moment. So we can expect for this to have a huge impact on our global ideology, on the global world order, if you want to put it that way, on notions of governance, on corporate governance, on banking, on technology, on big tech, and how that's going to wind up unfolding, whether it affirms or diminishes humanity. Pluto in Aquarius is going to be speaking to that a lot, and Uranus is going to be stirring things up along those lines as well. And the spark of humanity here, I think, is going to have a moment to rise to the occasion and speak to what it is specifically that we want out of these machines, out of all of this technological innovation. This is going to have a lot to do with our global economies, with the financial international institutions and organizations that have such an impact on how our nations work together or don't. And this is also going to impact us all on the level of culture in a pretty intense way, where we may feel that there's been a lot of top-down control over culture, over narratives, over ideas, especially through news media and things like this in various different countries. What's fascinating about this moment, though, is this opposition between Jupiter and Leo and Pluto and Aquarius. This is really working against entrenched power. It's going to call that into question, and it's going to meet it with as much force as is necessary. So I think that for, again, quite some time, we've been looking at the power structure internationally and nationally, and it's looked very big. It's looked very daunting. And yet I think a lot of us deep down have known, well, if we all just kind of rose to the occasion together, we would be able to force the issue. We would be able to make our demands quite clearly and push this in a better direction than just those limited interested powers and parties might want for things to continue to go. So that's the revolutionary energy that we have here, is that these two are very capable of meeting each other at the same level. Jupiter brings a huge amount of beneficence in and of itself, but it is also going to at times represent the centralization of power and of control. And at times, Pluto in Aquarius is going to represent the power of people together, the power of collectives, to push back against centralized power, especially like cult of personality or power that is centralized around specific people. But at times, too, when Pluto is playing out this part of big tech and the kind of like oligarchy, monopoly culture and everything, where it looks like, okay, there's so much centralization. Pluto in Aquarius itself is going to push against that, but it does also, to an extent, represent that power right now. And this Jupiter in Leo is also going to be lighting a spark within all of us to make that individual contribution that builds up into the collective pressure of this moment on the system to benefit more than just a few. So a lot of this is really going to be around notions of culture, ideology, politics, inequality, wealth, how that is distributed, how that is utilized, abuses of power. And I think populations across the world are going to be getting really worked up and putting a huge amount of pressure on their governments to change. So that's the intensity, the kind of revolutionary spark of this moment. That's why it's so powerful. That's why it's so historical. And now I want to back all of this up by digging into each one of these alignments. As I mentioned, there's 6 different alignments that are going on in this configuration here. They are all perfecting, which is to say every one of these alignments will be going exact from the 15th to the 25th of July, which just blows my mind. It's crazy to have this many outer planet alignments happening back to back, and then Jupiter aligning with all of those planets as well. So yeah, let's go ahead and dig into these. What we're going to do here, I have them laid out here according to like inner planet toward outer planet. That tends to be how astrologers refer to things. But the way that I'm going to actually address these alignments is I'm going to do it chronologically from the 15th to the 25th. So that is going to have us starting with Uranus sextile to Neptune, which is right here. This is going to be the first of quite a few, I want to say 5 to 7 different alignments that we're going to be getting between Uranus and Neptune over the coming several years here. But how wonderful is it that we get the first of these alignments just as Jupiter is lining up to support them? Now, these two are incredibly fascinating. Uranus is this liberation principle. It's about freedom. It is quite ideological. It's also about ideas and systems and how people work together. It's very innovative, very novelty seeking. So it's not afraid to draw outside the lines or draw upon ideas that haven't been utilized before, which I think could be really wonderful because I think that this moment is calling for absolutely new ideas. Not just going back to old ways of organizing ourselves as populations, but new ideas. A lot of us personally are going to experience experimentation with new visions of our lives. So that's how Uranus functions. Neptune is quite similar in that it goes beyond boundaries, it goes beyond restrictions, but it does so in this very diffuse kind of a way. It tends to meet us in our narratives, in our beliefs, in the collective unconscious, in culture. And so you can see how it almost sounds like Uranus is a little bit more technical, whereas Neptune can be seen almost a little bit more etheric or spiritual. They're both working with ideas and beliefs. They're both going beyond the confines of the status quo of convention. But when you get them both working together in this way, they're able to blend new visions. So a lot of us on a personal level, that's what this upper set of ideas is about. This is a little bit more personal. This is a little bit more global. That's how I'm going to have these set up. But a lot of us are going to be experimenting with new visions of ourselves, of our lives, of our sense of identity and group belonging, community belonging, the impact that we want to have on our communities. A lot of us are also going to be embracing and working with these experimental new ideas, different perspectives, hearing each other out, contributing our own ideas to the collective culture of this moment. So where are we all meeting each other? There's going to be some individual contributions to this from Neptune being in this very individualistic sign of Aries, but a lot of this is going to then become systematic through our community connections. So collaborating with, inspiring other people, that's going to be a big part of this too. It's not just that we're getting pushed forward to make our marks for ourselves, though that is going to be an important part of this, because we do need to believe in ourselves and we do need to enjoy ourselves and understand our own joy and pleasure and what we want. That's going to be important to this, but through acting on those ideals, through embodying that sense of pleasure and joy and excitement, we're able then to work with others, inspire others, and we could even wind up creating something of a feedback loop with others who are on a similar wavelength of contributing to this moment. So not only can we inspire others, but we're likely to be collaborating with people who can inspire us as well and can contribute new fascinating ideas to us. Now, on a global level, we're likely to see this play out as some strong countercultures arising. In fact, when I went back and I was looking at when was the last time, this was the mid to late 60s. And so there was a lot of youth counterculture that was, for one thing, creating wonderful music, but was also very imaginative and a real radical shift away from the status quo of previous decades and how the culture looked, what kinds of ideas people were working with prior to that, and also then the mainstreaming of all of that. So the youth having a really wonderful impact of being able to spread to each other these new ideas, these kind of avant-garde narratives about how we can function together better. Not to mention the flexibility, the openness of young people to these alternative ideas. Probably a lot of us here are also going to be quite inclined to be open to these things, but I think there's going to be a lot of young people really getting on board of we need to improve upon the society that we have inherited at this point. I think there's also likely to be a lot of very fascinating stubbornness to the idealism of this moment, to especially Jupiter and Uranus and Neptune all working together. These three, you can't break the idealism of them. They're going to have hope and they're going to defy convention. They're going to look for an improvement or a betterment. So it's going to be a lot easier in this moment to allow for that idealism to transcend the convention, to break through into the mainstream and then change what is conventional in and of itself. Additionally, there's a lot of experimentation between these two, and that's also likely to spark new spiritualities or new belief systems, new narratives about our place within the universe and what we're capable of, why we're here. I think there's been a lot of weird ideas about that recently, like the transhumanism and so forth, which maybe we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to that. But when you get a very narrow class of people deciding what they think that should look like space mining and things like this, it can cause us to kind of look away from that. But I do think that a big part of this moment is going to be redefining our relationship as humanity, as Earthlings, within the broader universe, within our cosmic neighborhood, so to speak. So what kind of relationship do we want to have with all of that? It's likely that we'll also see a lot of literature and ideas shared between people, a lot of speaking to this, and I think it's going to be incredibly fascinating. So we may not have Star Trek technology yet, but I think we're going to start having some of those conversations, which is going to be wonderful. So yeah, overall, this is just very outside the box, very transcendent experimentation with new ideas, new solutions. It's very intensely idealistic, and perhaps even in spite of those that would seek to undermine collective joy. This is going to support the rapid spread or dissemination of ideas, of stories, of messaging, of narratives, to help us to really go beyond the ordinary discourse, the conventional conversations that we've been having for decades. I think there's even an underlying attitude here between these two that almost anything is better than what has failed us up until this point, what has gotten us into this mess. And yet there's still this sense of active excitement about collaboration, about connectivity, about how we could imagine a better future. And so that's also going to underpin a lot of this new spiritual, cultural frontier mentality. Finally, the only thing that I would maybe warn about with this is that because it's so idealistic, and this is going to sound so foreign to us as of recently, where so many of us have been like, oh gosh, how are things going to turn out? But there could be a bit of a risk of like sidestepping real issues by seeking to feel better in the moment because of the excitement of the moment. So trying to stay on track and trying to really keep the vision and keep our eyes on the prize, I think is going to be a little bit more of the challenge with this. But that's where the opposition between Jupiter and Pluto is going to help us. So that is going to complete on the 15th of July. As I said, we're teasing these apart, but that doesn't happen in a vacuum. All of this is really happening simultaneously. However, the next exact alignment that we have is going to be between Uranus in Gemini and Pluto in Aquarius. So this is a trine configuration, also very flowing. On a personal level, this is going to represent an opportunity for breakthrough where we were once stuck. So overcoming stagnation, overcoming the sense that we can't push through, that we can't push through the conventional blockages, pushing through any notions that our knowledge isn't valuable or shouldn't be shared or is too radical or won't be accepted. This is really encouraging us to share our new, unique perspectives on how to move forward. Now, that can happen on a community level, on a business level, on a personal level, but certainly it makes sense that that's going to be coming through in this moment where we're all going to be needing to talk to each other kind of on a global level as well and on a cultural level. Another thing I think we're going to find with this alignment, and just to clarify, this is another one where we're just kicking off with these trines, but these are also going to continue with us for several years. Kicking off perfectly in time to align with Jupiter there as well. But this is going to help us find our resilience through flexibility and adaptability. So the intelligence, the wit, the ability to change, the ability to take on new ideas, the ability to embrace diversity of thought and opinion, the ability to be agreeable with each other, to hold space for each other, to allow for each other to hold some differing views. That's going to be very supported by all of this, as well as our ability to relate with each other, to connect. So those who are really working on the level of the cerebral, of the communicative, of the technological, working on the lines of intelligence, this is going to be incredibly supportive to all these different people. Again, this is also going to be impacting us in our personal lives as well. So that is something to keep in mind. Openness to learning, openness to having a flexible mental framework and ideological framework, being very solutions oriented. So on a cultural global level, we're likely to see huge acceleration from this when it comes to technological innovation. So that's probably some of what we're going to need to be speaking to in this moment is all of these new technological advancements that we've been witnessing and that we're likely to witness in the coming years to get really clear ideologically about where we're going to meet that, where we're going to insist that the lines between this and the value of humanity in and of itself are going to be drawn. How are we going to utilize all of this innovation to help humanity rather than to box us in or to limit our options? This is also going to be speaking to global networks of communication, sharing ideas, transportation, logistics, money flows, things like this. That's all going to wind up playing into this. And it's going to be spurring a huge amount of ideas and solutions. This one is really likely, as I mentioned, these are both marks of the US Revolution back in the late 18th century. So this does tend to spark a revolutionary transformation of society, of networks, of our notion of community and belonging. And just as we did in the late 18th century, we're likely to see a bit of that cat and mouse game here. Yes, the accelerationism, the innovation, and the fact that that could go either way. Are we going to democratize that, or are we going to allow for the benefits of that to be centralized? I think that the force of inevitable change here should wind up animating people to seek to disrupt the current solutions, to seek to insist on those boundaries around the value of humanity. What's interesting is I think that it's going to be important to have new ideas, but I do think that this alignment is going to spur on a little bit of act first, think later, which fortunately this is also really good at solving. So that flexibility of problem solving, even if as we are moving fast as societies, even as we are pushing toward new ideas that may have some little fault lines in them, will also be very well supported by these alignments. And this one in particular, of course, kicking everything off, of fixing all of those little things as we go. This is also very supportive of progress, of advancement. It's very rebellious. It's very unconventional. It's just about forging ahead into like a brave new world, for better or worse. If you're a student of the US Revolution, they didn't know what they were doing, really. And they had to solve so many problems as they went. And then once they were trying to figure out the Constitution, of course, federalism, anti-federalism, they basically came to this conclusion of we need to break this down first and then figure out the solutions. And it wound up certainly working better. I think a lot of us agree than the monarchical system that we had prior. Certainly not perfect, right? But the collective consciousness here is really going to be hyper-stimulated. So the overstimulation, the information overload, we're going to be acting on that in these moments. So that's also part of why being able to stay on our toes, being able to find that resilience of flexibility and adaptability, being able to learn as we go, I think that's going to be incredibly important with these alignments. Now, some of the developments, the innovations on a technical level that we're very likely just looking at the situation right now to see under this is along the lines of nuclear weapons and nuclear power, as well as quantum computing, of course. We're likely to see disruptions in how we connect and exchange information. We're also likely to see a push-pull between centralization and open sourcing. We're also likely to see an uptick in things like hacking or leaks of information. And that may wind up playing into some of this broader global, cultural, social progress that we're making during this time, as maybe some information that's released. Now, this is also going to be very transgressive. There's probably going to be some crimes built into this as well when these two get together in this way. So I would definitely see if you can do the two-factor authorization, things like that. This is going to be working along the lines of little disruptions that come from underworlds or outsiders, the undercurrents. We're also likely to see disruptions from, for instance, blocking traffic and those kinds of crimes where it's for a specific reason and it's not intended to do harm, but it still disrupts the usual way of going about things. Hopefully we don't see network outages and things like this, either top down or bottom up at different times, but that also wouldn't terribly surprise me. But yeah, this one is going to be incredibly restless, very impulsive collectives that are going to be willing to push the envelope. So that's going to be a lot of our Uranus trine to Pluto. So now let's talk about the next alignment is going to be on the 20th. We're going to get Jupiter in a trine to Neptune here. This is so beautifully idealistic. It's across fire signs. So that's what we're dealing with here is inspiration, spirit, courage, belief, willingness to take action. So on a personal level, this is going to inspire us to embrace our own courage, to be daring, to take some risks, to put ourselves out there, to be seen, to express ourselves, to take pride in who we are, in our identity, and to find that experience of self as quite internally and externally expansive. So no longer holding ourselves in, holding ourselves back, playing small. This is about rising to only the limits we place on ourselves, not those that feel like they are somehow externally imposed on us. The extent to which we can believe in ourselves is, without a doubt, the extent to which we can work with the Jupiter and Leo trine to a Neptune and Aries. So for a lot of people, this is going to be an incredibly optimistic moment. A lot of us are going to be pushing toward like entrepreneurship, pushing ourselves further, reaching higher for ourselves, wanting more for ourselves, and being willing to ask for it. Being willing not only to ask for it, but to create it. So taking that inspired action. Acting on our own belief, on our own conviction, being very brave in that way. So there's so much passion, vibrancy, daring, courage across the board with this kind of energy. I think it's going to be so absolutely wonderful, especially as an internal experience. Now, it's going to be really cool to see it out in the world too. But I do think that there are some people in this world that might not really need the extra boost. And when we're watching them, This may be a little annoying to see. It may look like a huge amount of like self-aggrandizement by certain people, this kind of saviorism or personal heroism. Now, some of this is going to be incredibly real, but some of it is going to be like delusional or basically playing out as main character syndrome or creating like cults of personality around the self rather than trying to contribute to collective effort, trying to get others on board with your own agenda. So this is something that we'll want to keep our head on a swivel about just a little bit. I think that there's so much flexibility and so much that is going right in this moment that even as this issue arises, even if it does catch some of us up, either by buying into these things from other people or even through a little bit of over-optimism at times, it's still going to be really easy to get ourselves out of those situations, given the opposition to Pluto and the flowing aspects to Uranus here. So yeah, within this energy, there's huge glorification, a lot of mystique created around confidence, around heroes. A lot of them are going to be real. Some of this is just going to be like a blind aggrandizement of like military and police, kind of regardless of the actual actions taken. Also patriotism. So like looking for a version of oneself or looking for one's identity outside of oneself. That's one thing I would caution about a little bit here. This is going to be encouraging us, but if we have a weak sense of self, we may look to group identities and build that up to the detriment of something else. That's where I think we have the weakest link here, basically. That is likely to then wind up being utilized to the ends of people who take up a lot of space. A lot of the stories that are going to resonate in this moment are going to be stories of daring, of gusto, of charisma, of like taking what's yours, of winning, making your mark, individualism, like individual effort and reward. And some of this is going to be true. Some of it's going to be fantasy. But I think that as long as we're focused on the notion of contribution to something greater than ourselves, I think that this is more likely to be helpful than anything else. We may see a lot of really grand cultural statements during this time, like epics or really dramatic arts as well, which I think could be wonderful for making vibrant again or renewing our sense of culture. So like a cultural revival, basically, from the malaise that we've been experiencing for quite some time. The courage to go one's own way, to break the mold, to seek adventure, to seek meaning, to take inspired action. That's going to be really contagious. And what's contagious about that is the enthusiasm, is the inspiration, is the vision. And so I think that's going to be such a valuable component to all of this as well, is just reviving our spirits. That said, I think it's wonderful if we can keep in mind some of the difference between what feels good and what is reviving to the spirit, which I think we should lean into, but be aware of what it is versus what's true. So I think that for some people, we will get a little bit mixed up and blurred lines between what's true and what makes us feel good. This is not the most practical of a trine, without a doubt. And so that's where it could fall a little bit short. But sometimes we don't need to act on practicality. Sometimes we need to seize the moment. Sometimes we need to lean into the passion and the vibrancy, the daring, the courage of the moment in order to spark something off that we can check and make sure is practical down the road. Now, this is also one of the areas where we're likely to see some notions of that individualism come through as like individual sovereignty or being able to make rules for oneself or being self-regulating individuals versus collectivism. And I think that may be one of the lines that's drawn between how is it that we're advancing along the lines of it shouldn't just be the ruling classes that are benefiting from all of this. I think we will get a little bit of both mixed together there. The extent to which we can hold some space for each other, the extent to which we can understand the value of individual rights as well as collective rights, collective ideas, working together towards something that benefits all of us together, rather than the like, I got mine kind of winner mentality. Finding the line between those and trying to balance those out, I think is going to be quite important in this moment. Now, we will probably wind up leaning too far in one direction, too far in another, and actively need to find that balance though. But I think that that's going to be fine. Now, that's going to happen on the 20th of July, as well as the opposition from Jupiter to Pluto, which is just a little bit later in that day. And this is what is causing the rubber to really meet the road here. So this is where the potency, where the power, where the kind of explosiveness of this moment winds up coming into play, is because of the dynamic tension between the opposition of Jupiter and Leo versus Pluto in Aquarius. Now, this is going to help us to recognize our own unique gifts, what makes us unique, what makes us individual, what makes us special. Hopefully, it can help us to recognize that in other individuals as well. Hopefully, this can also help us to rise in this moment, to not feel ashamed to confront our own ego concerns and any sort of imbalances along those lines. Almost none of us are perfect on that. I'm certainly not perfect when it comes to, is the ego a little bit weak at times? Is it a little bit overstrong at times? Is there some overcorrection? Is there some playing small, some building oneself up, etc.? We all do this from time to time. So the extent to which we can just honestly, as Jupiter in Leo, look at that Pluto and how our own individuality reflects back to us through the collective, I think that's going to be incredibly important, especially as we're trying to work through what is my contribution to this moment? What am I capable of in this world and in this society? How can I push myself to reach for more without getting too far ahead of my skis? I think that there's going to be a huge amount of benefit from this moment, from our ability to utilize and direct our willpower and our personal courage, our willingness to act on our convictions, our willingness to name and display and honor our convictions, on our ability to respond to the call to action that is baked into this moment. So as I mentioned, on a personal level, this is going to look like all different kinds of things. That's really most supported by the horoscopes, because for all of us on an individual level, specifically what this is speaking to is, how do you feel about yourself relative to the collective? Do you feel that you can find your space within that? So that's the call to action. That's that notion of contribution. I also absolutely see this as calling so many that have unique gifts that are ideal for responding to the collective, global, cultural, social moment, historic moment. So calling on individuals to make their mark on the development of society here, especially regarding the purpose of society, on social renewal, on how power is utilized, on what's acceptable, on what is not acceptable. This is going to call for people who have a unique amount of courage in the face of a potential abuse of power. It's also going to call for collective efforts against some specific individuals who are being quite abusive in this moment and need to be taken down a peg or two or a trillion, right? So that revolutionary fervor is going to be pretty unique in some people, and especially the ability to garner others to the cause. So to call on the collectives as an individual to confront any sort of extremes of inequality, leadership issues, cult of personality issues, especially like out of touch leadership, responding directly to that, getting all of us on board, building those collectivist efforts, building mutual aid efforts. Perhaps even building alternative leadership or parallel leadership structures and societies and communities, kind of like was necessary during the US Revolution, where it was like, well, okay, if the parliament isn't going to answer our concerns, then we're going to need to make our own Congress and discuss our concerns collectively and discuss how are we going to action these concerns? How are we going to get them addressed? We may need to do it on our own in that moment, was the consensus. So this is really a moment of the exaltation of spiritual, creative, imaginative, charismatic gifts that are going to support the inspiration of those with the kinds of talents and skills and ideas that can create a new, very revolutionary generation or strain of new community leaders for this moment. So it's not just a call to action for individuals to use their own gifts, but for some people, those gifts are going to be the ability to garner others, the ability to bridge gaps between people, to get everyone on the same page and working toward collective goals. Now, one of the very important things I think when we are building out communities and so forth is not just confronting power, but also consciously using power with each other as well, and trying to live out that example that we're wanting to see. Because on the other side of this, as I have here, ruthless power struggles, tyranny, issues coming up around corrupt leaders, that rebellious attitude is about something that's very entrenched, and it's not just going to give up easily. So I would not be surprised to see some very overinflated egos taken down a notch here. I would not be surprised to see those who are inclined to centralize power to themselves, really glory seeking for themselves, putting others down, making underhanded comments and threats, putting one's own selfish desires above the needs of collectives, and responding with a lot of resentment and envy or rivalry to any sort of action taken outside of their control by people, or even against their centralization or their control or their abuse of power. So this is a moment ultimately of conflict of egos and wills. We're likely to see some real blowouts in this moment, some challenges, some major competition, even competition between different aspects of ruling classes or the powers that be. Power struggles, utilizing charisma, utilizing active hard control, ruthless power plays, extreme wealth concentration and the concentration of power within that, and then the response to that. What's interesting is that issues that are under the surface are likely to come to light. And yet there's also going to be these attempts to dampen down on the light of this moment for the collectives through propaganda, through media control. And we are likely to see in this moment some major tests of will. So I definitely recommend pacing ourselves through this moment. This isn't just all going to happen in this moment in time. This is a spark of something that's going to be developing certainly over the coming year into next summer, summer of 2027, but even beyond that. This configuration between Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, this is going to play out for several years. I'm going to have all the relevant dates in the description and the pinned comment because I know we're dealing with multiple layers of dates and I want to try and make that as clear as I can. But we don't need to rush through this. We just need to all meet each other at this moment and understand that a spark has been lit and that we're going to be following through on that from this point. So what we're likely to see here is a lot of challenges for governments, for banks, for institutions of extreme and sometimes even covert power. So all of the secret wealth, the under the surface wealth is also likely to be pointed out in this moment and utilized. Powerful people may even encounter some kind of palace intrigue or people working behind their backs, secrets outed by each other even. Blackmail could even wind up taking some people down in this moment, some very powerful people. And so I really expect that we're going to see some serious comeuppance in this moment. I think it's going to be fascinating. I'm certainly going to have some popcorn around it. It will be serious, though. It's going to be historic. It's going to be powerful. And a lot of it is going to have a huge amount of impact on society. But I think reminding ourselves of the importance of collective power and working together, but also the importance of remembering that extreme power corrupts inherently. So this isn't just about necessarily picking one or another very powerful, centralized figures to lead something. It's really much more important that we decentralize in this moment. And that's one of the most beautiful things about Pluto and Aquarius is that it naturally does this. It naturally does wind up drawing down and breaking apart centralized power. If you want to dig a little bit more into that, there's also this notion of it goes out of bounds toward the south when it is in Aquarius. It goes out of bounds up to the north when it's in Leo. And what we tend to see when it's in Aquarius and when it continues to go out of bounds when it's there, which is to say outside of the range that the sun is able to go, northern hemisphere to southern hemisphere. So as it reaches beyond that into Aquarius, it tends to break apart empires. And that's going to be really important when we discuss the sextile between Neptune and Pluto in a moment here as well. So we'll come back to that notion. Before we get into that, though, we also need to discuss this really wonderful, very fortunate sextile between Jupiter and Uranus, which is going to be perfecting then the next day on the 21st of July of 2026. This may be one of my favorites. I absolutely adore this. It's so much about freedom, about liberation, about going beyond constraints. I tend to look at Uranus as a major instigator for the usually pretty well-behaved Jupiter. Jupiter usually respects the limits, the constraints of Saturn, but when Uranus is spurring it on, what it can wind up doing is we can wind up with the impacts, the effects of a Uranian major disruption of the status quo, but do so in a way that is very beneficial and that is quite fortunate and that can lean on the luck, the good timing, the optimism, the goodwill of Jupiter to get the best out of any sort of major innovations here. So I absolutely adore these alignments. This is on a personal level going to speak to major benefits from a sense of personal liberation and freedom to be ourselves, to be really authentic, to be very curious, to get excited about things, to lean into that kind of youthful joy about possibility and working together, finding the contribution that we are able to make to the community. That's another major thing with Uranus and Gemini is it's going to be speaking to our local communities, but also global communities, online communities, etc. The curiosity about each other, curiosity about what makes each other unique and therefore what makes us unique, how we can encourage each other, how we can find greater degrees of freedom in our own lives. There's a lot of lucky breaks that can come in with Jupiter and Uranus as well. And yeah, ultimately, when these two get together, it's about freedom. It's about growth beyond limitations. So as open an outlook as we can have, likely the best that we're going to wind up benefiting from this moment. We're likely to see a huge amount of excitement out of this alignment. This is also very affirming of youthfulness, of humor, of enthusiasm for novelty and variety. Change, there's an openness and an optimism about change here. This is also going to connect a lot of different people. So like social expansion, the expansion of our social circles and our focus and prioritization on getting together and working together cooperatively and collaboratively. This is also very supportive of self-expression, especially verbal expression or expression of ideas. There's a huge amount of curiosity, a real enthusiasm and excitement for learning, for teaching. And so this is going to help too with the ideological nature of Uranus and then the philosophical nature of Jupiter and the openness of them both, the enthusiasm with which they will converse with each other. Some real new dynamic ideologies and philosophies that we're working with here that are very innovative, that represent breakthroughs in our insights, our collective insights on how to make things work, even amidst a huge amount of acceleration and expansion and disruption. So how do we make sense of everything? These two are going to do it quite quickly. And it is going to be kind of all hands on deck when it comes to coming up with new ideas. So that's, I think, part of why self-expression is so important within all of this, is that we can't really hold back on our ideas because we may have one of those little keys. We may have one of the little puzzle pieces and the, 5,000 piece puzzle that's going to wind up forming the solutions to this moment. And we need all of those pieces. So it's going to be important that a lot of us are acting from a place of personal courage, a willingness to make our own authentic contributions to this moment. This is also really going to encourage reform, addressing the breaking points of the old systems that are no longer working and being willing to evolve beyond them. This is likely to have a lot of messages, a lot of conversation, a lot of announcements, a lot of things published and said that are also going to be very inspiring. We're likely to see a lot of news stories published that are going to be really big through this moment as well. We may even see the introduction of some new styles, some new fascinations, some new trends, some new topics or subjects like interdisciplinary ways of looking at things that are going to blend into even new fields. So yeah, with this alignment, we're going to benefit a lot the more open that we are to conversation, to learning, and to sharing our authentic ideas. Curiosity is going to be absolutely wonderful with this. So that is then going to take us to the whole context in which all of this is playing out. This is a subject of great fascination and a lot of study for me is this sextile between Neptune and Pluto. There are countless of these. The reason for that is that there's approximately a 500-year cycle between Neptune and Pluto. So for instance, in the late 19th century, we had a conjunction between Neptune and Pluto. And from that point, it'll be about 500 years before we have that conjunction again. But in the midst of that cycle, we spend a whole century of that 500 years with Neptune and Pluto in this opening sextile to each other. This is a pattern that we see repeatedly. The reason for this is that Pluto has an elliptical orbit, and when Pluto goes through Scorpio, it's at the closest point to the sun, to Earth. That's the perihelion of Pluto. And that happened in the late 80s. So Pluto was actually closer to the sun, to the Earth, than Neptune was at that point. So it swooped inside of the orbit of Neptune. And when it does that, it holds for, again, a whole century, almost 90 years or so, in this sextile. So this is a pattern cycle that spans from the 1940s all the way into the 2030s. Now, as I mentioned, I have studied the heck out of this. I have gone back thousands of years and looked at the history of all of these alignments, and it perfectly aligns with the coalescence of centralized cultural power, which is highly glorified. So another way of saying that is it usually comes together as an empire. And what's fascinating is that we see major developments along those lines. We see that wind up hitting a major pivot point when we get the edges of the sextile here. So in this time, since the 1940s, certainly we have seen global power consolidate to an extent that we still cannot really wrap our minds around. Now, what's wonderful about all of these moments when we go back through the history of this alignment is that those global cultural influences, they do serve as these hubs of innovation that do ultimately wind up developing a lot of cultural enrichment, but also a lot of cultural control because there is this kind of homogenization that tends to come together under that. So a lot of people refer to that now as westernization or globalization, things like that. So we've seen this certainly play out since the 1940s, as long as this one has been going on, this alignment. We also see a huge amount then of social, technological advancement during these times. However, for a lot of that period of time, it does wind up reinforcing the ruling classes. And this is the crux of the point that we're coming to with this. Those deeply embedded dominant narratives that we've been working with for some time, they are very beneficial to the very few that have centralized a lot of power. And this moment looks like when that power starts to break down, when all of that cultural enrichment, that collective intelligence is able to organize itself in a way that transcends that conventional centralization dynamic that we have found ourselves in. So when it comes down to it, I tend to look at this, I tend to speak of this as contemporary culture, contemporary society. And that is what is under so much pressure from this moment. That is what is aligning so perfectly. The intelligence and the collective will of the people that were created by this global order that we've been working within. As individuals working together, we also have the ability in this moment to correct course, to change the tack, to make sure that, especially with all of the technological innovation that's coming out of this moment, that we regain collectively the upper hand here. So you can see how incredibly potent all of this is to be happening one right after the other. Again, it's mind-blowing to me that we're getting all of these different alignments just from the 15th to the 25th of July of 2026. Now, in terms of the timing, again, there's different layers here. This perfect 4-degree alignment between the planets, this is going to take place from the 15th to the 25th-ish, given a little time. It's actually a little closer in like the 19th, maybe to like the 22nd or so, when Jupiter is also at 4 degrees there, and it's aligning to all of these other planets. This is going to be the spark. This is the kickoff point. But we deal with all of the same energies all the way until summer of 2027. Then we'll get Jupiter moving into Virgo and beyond. But then even from that point, we still have this very dynamic and active energy that is developing throughout the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So we don't need to rush to make sure that everything happens in July. We just need to make sure that we understand the importance of this moment, the importance of paying attention, the importance of conversing with each other and sharing our ideas. And perhaps more than anything, the importance of us actually taking action at this point and not just being passive as we have for a few decades. With that said, there's always a global geographical alignment or hot points when it comes to specific alignments. And I wanted to look at that particularly for the opposition between Jupiter and Pluto. So what I mean by that is when Jupiter is at 4 degrees and 26 minutes and it's exactly opposite to Pluto, in that moment, we will have those planets rising and setting in one place. We'll have them, one of them all the way like directly above head and directly below the Earth, for instance. So in that moment, there will be certain angles of the Earth that are highlighted. And I did look at that and I noticed that it does look like Australia up through Japan is highlighted by this. Central Asia is highlighted by this. Greenland is. In the moment of the opposition between Jupiter and Pluto in the sky. So again, when that alignment happens on the 20th of July, we will have the Mars-Uranus conjunction, which we can see here, which is kind of wide here, but that will be directly overhead of the US, which is very important for executive power. We could see a breakdown there. We will also see the sun incredibly prominent above Brazil. So we may see, for instance, Lula da Silva or some other executive leadership in Brazil standing out in this moment too. Now, additionally, we will have some very interesting alignments as well during this opposition over Alaska and Belarus. That said, I expect for this to be a globally significant movement and series of movements that are developing throughout this period of time. This could be quite explosive as well. And some of these things are kicked off with actual conflicts. We may see some literal revolutions and rebellions. We may see some attacks even that fall outside of those other kind of definitions. So expect for this to be a really powerful historical moment, for the world to look somewhat different in August and perhaps more clarified in August than it did when we were first coming into July. And I just want to remind that this looks so beneficent to me. It looks so helpful to me. It looks like there's so much divine intervention and guidance in this moment. That is what the omen to me of all of these planets that are wonderful and powerful, all being at 4 degrees, speaks of to me. There may be some outside help, regardless of how you want to look at what that would be beyond humanity, whether it be the fates, the cosmos, whatever it is. It looks to me like an intervention here. It looks to me like a moment of a calling for many of us to live our lives the way that we feel we're actually meant to live them. To stop living within just the rat race that is defined for us, these little boxes that we've been stuck into, to collaborate, to be truly enthusiastic about our lives, about our societies as well, and not forget that these are our societies. This is our earthly planet, and it is up to us how things go. It's just a matter of us taking the action that's necessary to prove that point. But yeah, with all of that said, I hope that this is a wonderful time. I hope that it is so much more inspiring than it is unsettling, but I think there's going to be some measure of both. I hope that we can all encourage each other, that we can lift each other up, that we can take each other under our wings, that we can support each other, that we can watch out for each other collectively, that we can try not to allow ourselves to be divided and conquered, that we can embrace our own joy, our own pleasure, our own humanity and the value of that. The much greater significance of that than any dollars or any technological advancements. So with that, I do want to thank you all so much for spending this time with me. If you don't mind giving the video a like or hype, I would really greatly appreciate that. There's also information in the description box and the pinned comment for personal readings if that is something that you are needing. There's also information about membership perks, weekly forecasts where I go through and delineate every single different alignment that's going to happen in a given week, as well as monthly courses, discounts on readings, free reading drawings, etc. And thank you so much to the members of this channel for your support. It really means the world to me. Much love to you all. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into the sign by sign. All right, so for Aries, we have this basket aspect pattern developing across your first, third, fifth, and 11th houses. So for you, this is going to be fundamentally about your personal expression and those that you're connected to. So this alignment of Neptune to Jupiter here is quite fascinating along the lines of who you are and your sense of confidence and embrace of yourself, your own interests, your own goals, your own priorities. There's a lot of idealism to work with here, which I think is absolutely wonderful. If you have felt uninspired, if you have felt stuck in a rut at all in recent years, this is definitely going to put the quash on that and really open you up and inspire you toward your own personal pleasures, enjoyment, what you find is important to your own spirit, to your own soul, to your own sense of purpose and meaning in your life. And there's a lot of encouragement to lean into all of that. So this could be along the lines of personal projects. This could even speak to entrepreneurship with Jupiter in your fifth house. If there's something that you have been wanting to develop and wanting to make public, this could be very helpful along those lines. But even if this isn't like a professional thing that you're developing, following your heart and following your passions is incredibly encouraged here. It's also likely to be very serendipitous as to how you discover those passions, like where your heart is leading you is likely to bring you down some very serendipitous paths. Things that just feel karmically aligned to you, that seem to open up opportunities that are almost inexplicable as to how you wound up aligning yourself to them, that feel like they fit so wonderfully, that feel really fundamentally expansive of you as well. And that personal expansion, a lot of that is going to feel like it's coming from inside of yourself. So you may feel almost this upswell of expression and personality and spirit that's impossible to hold in. And what's wonderful about that is that with these two being quite idealistic and very affirming of you and your expression and your interests and so forth, this should also help you with a lot of confidence that you may need to put this out there into the world. The visibility as well, you may find that in those moments where you need to step up and be visible and not be shy about things, that energy seems to just kind of come through for you in those moments. So if that's something that you tend to be shy about, you may find that in those moments where you do need to maybe do some public speaking or teach or talk about something or write and publish about something, anything along those lines, even marketing yourself, that inspiration, that confidence just seems to come through naturally. So these two will absolutely help you rise to any moment, to have that confidence in yourself in those moments too. This can also be incredibly prolific to be dealing with these energies along personal lines. So I would potentially consider like an ideas journal or something like that, to where you can write down what you're inspired to do, because you may find that there's just too much that you are really feeling encouraged to work with. And taking some of that down could be quite helpful to organize those thoughts, but also to keep those ideas for you down the road. I'd even encourage with this, if there isn't immediately an opportunity to pursue a specific interest of yours, writing it down may also just seem to draw it in a little easier. And being really honest with yourself about what interests you as well, I think is going to be important here. You do have Pluto up in your 11th house, and sometimes social expectation can come through the 11th house. So if you're connecting with more influential people or people that you even look up to or hold in high esteem, sometimes when we connect with energies like that, we can try to please that energy or try to be what we think that they will want for us to be. But Jupiter's going to push back against that a little bit, which I think is going to be wonderful. The fifth house is a place where we are uninhibited, where we just do our own thing, where we follow our own passions. And you may find that there's almost this gumption within you to just be yourself, show up as yourself. And you may find that you get some really fascinating positive feedback to that as well. And that could wind up increasing your sense of confidence as well. But yeah, ultimately, these two together are going to be working on a major personal reinvention and a personal expansion when it comes to your sense of identity, your sense of direction in life, the impact that you can have, the influence that you can have. And a lot of that is going to rest on you being really authentic in expressing yourself. So, not just trying to fit into the group expectations, the social expectations, but even willing to push up against that at times if that doesn't feel authentic to you. So we also have this other set of components here. Pluto up in the 11th house is also in a trine to Uranus in your 3rd house. So these are major change makers, and these are social houses. So the 11th house has to do with groups of people, group identities. So where you feel like you fit into certain groups as well. Lifestyle can also show up here. Your sense of connection to social causes and belief systems can also show up in the 11th house. And then Uranus is also a major change maker, very experimental, very liberatory. And that's in your 3rd house. This is the place of community, the people, places, things around you, generally speaking. Peers, siblings tend to show up here, your neighborhood, but also communication, your sense of exchange with those around you. So again, these are very social places, and they do seem to be pointing to some level of turnover here, potentially. So you may find that you are outgrowing or evolving beyond certain groups that you may have identified with previously. And this could give you an opportunity to experiment with connecting with different groups of people and like showing this new version of yourself, this new expanded, more creative, more expressive, more authentic version of yourself, more confident version of yourself, and see who is that drawing in. Because it's likely that you're going to find that you're able to naturally draw in your tribe, so to speak, through just being authentically yourself, but still getting out there in the world, not being shy to defy the expectations of other people. So you may find that you are connecting with people who are either very, very, very intelligent or quite creative, outside the box thinkers. They may even be quite influential within certain social circles or within your community. This may be also connecting with people around social causes. So Uranus can be kind of ideological. It can be about ideas, right? And in the place of community, there may be some people within your community that have some strong opinions, some strong ideas about how your community should look. And they may also be quite influential within certain social circles. So if you are getting stirred up to follow your heart about certain things, that may draw you into some social causes or some community groups. Or this could be getting involved even in leagues in your area or professional groups within your area, people of like mind and like ideas within your community, and developing a greater sense of personal influence with that Pluto in your 11th, because this will sometimes show up as influential people that you're connecting with, but it is a two-way street. It does also speak to a developing influence that you have over your community as well and over the groups that you belong to. So stepping into leadership positions. And by getting to know yourself and allowing for yourself to expand, to develop confidence and so forth, that may be just what you are needing to create a spark within your community, to communicate more authentically, to have a greater impact with your words and with your ideas as well on those around you, and to develop the confidence to step into leadership roles. Now, you may also find with Uranus in the 3rd house, there may be certain aspects of this that are involved with learning or travel, transit, going from place to place, being a bridge between different groups of people. So you may be bringing people together, maybe through technology or events as well. That's one thing. Jupiter in the 5th house and Leo may really love to host events. So if that's something that you're interested in, I would definitely encourage that as well. But just like getting out into your community, connecting with all different kinds of people, sharing your perspective, learning from those around you. That's also going to wind up feeding into all of these different aspects of your confidence and your leadership skills that are developing through this time. Additionally, that may speak to some of this not just being local community, but also online community. But yeah, I think that's a lot of what I want to say about this basket aspect configuration for you, Aries. It is super fascinating. I think it's going to be really exciting. I think it's going to be truly affirming of you. Again, I think number one here is going to be follow your heart, with that Jupiter leading the way in Leo there. And just a little bit more on the timing here. Because there's different layers for sure. We are going to have Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all configured to each other in this little sub-aspect pattern here, which is called a minor grand trine. That's going to be ongoing for several years. So this is developing in many, many, many layers over the coming years. And I have a video that I did just over that. That's going to be in the related videos in the description box as well as in the pinned comment. I also just did a video about Jupiter and Leo in and of itself. That's going to be ongoing for about a year. So if you want to dig into these components a little bit further, I've covered them from a few different angles at this point, but also this really symmetrical, beautiful alignment of all the planets in the sky, which is super crazy, all at 4 degrees here. This is going to be developing in late July of 2026 in particular. So we're likely to see a major kickoff point to all of this, which is going to be unfolding over several years in July of 2026 in particular. So yeah, hopefully that clarifies some of the different layers of timing that we're dealing with. And other than that, I do hope that this configuration treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Taurus, we have the basket pattern taking place across your second, fourth, 10th, and 12th houses. So this is an interesting combination to have working together. What we basically have here is your private life, which can be quite emotionally tinged. It can have a lot to do with personal conditioning that you received when you were young. Your family life tends to show up here. It's all very private behind the scenes between these houses. And then what we have between the second and the 10th houses is your finances, your income, your standing, your security, and then your public life. So if you have a traditional career path kind of a thing going on, if you have like specifically a professional life, then that'll be showing up in the 10th house. So I could definitely see a work-life balance thing coming in here quite significantly. The developments, the personal progress that you are making internally and privately, behind the scenes, even like psychologically, if you are digging into some things and like trying to release some conditioning or some attachments or things like this, we could see that actually helping quite a bit with your public life, your financial life, your sense of external security through working on the internal security. So that's a very fascinating way that this could wind up taking place. We have the big change makers across your second and your 10th houses. So we could expect to see some significant shifts when it comes to your finances, your income, your assets. Investments can sometimes show up here. And again, that recognition, public, professional life. So expect changes really along these lines, like a major restructuring. You could see some increased influence in the public sphere with Pluto, which is, it takes up a lot of space. It tends to be quite formidable, and it can show up quite powerfully for you publicly, could offer some opportunities as well. You may even find that with Uranus, which tends to bring some sharp shifts, that when it comes to your income and what you value, that in and of itself is shifting quite a bit. So for instance, if you've been on a pretty dry career path and you've been pushing pretty hard, for one thing, this could all have you desiring to go independent or working from home or something like that so that you have a little bit more control over that. But you may even just be finding that there's certain aspects of your professional life that, or like the keeping up with the Joneses or the rat race kind of aspect of financial life, that your priorities are just shifting when it comes to that. Maybe that's less of a priority for you. Maybe you're recognizing, I've been backburnering emotional stuff for so long at this point. I've been planning to come back to it, but if I don't do it now, when will I? So coming back to your own priorities when it comes to what you value, and also letting that then fuel your vision for your future. And especially with that in combination with Pluto up here, not letting security fears or things like that get in the way of pushing yourself further. So really reaching for something without allowing to hold you back, like, oh, what if I misstep, or what if I'm not perfectly ready? This is so much less about that than really believing in yourself deeply. Ultimately what we have is major personal healing, even potentially like a wonderful purge growth period to where you're like clearing out the internal energy and allowing there to be more space for personal growth, internal growth, while you also have this career transformation going on. So this is all happening simultaneously, which could be quite interesting. Again, I think this will wind up coming through in like a work-life balance kind of a situation here. And you may need to reprioritize in order to do something like that. Like I mentioned, this may incline toward like work from home or wanting to go independent and maybe making some of the shifts and changes that you'll need in order to do so. Additionally, what we have across the second and the fourth houses here, property tends to come into the considerations here. So this could be landed property like real estate. This could be family holdings or family finances that are up for a pretty pleasant, like a pretty helpful restructuring or growth period. You may actually have some pretty pleasant surprises along all of those lines. That said, you could see a financial change due to an appraisal of land being larger than you would expect. So that is something to maybe keep in consideration. However, for instance, if you're looking to sell or to buy property, this looks pretty good to me for that kind of thing. Additionally, your notions of security are going to come into this pretty big time with the 12th and the 2nd and the 4th, this whole little minor grand trine section of this. This is really about like, how do you internally perceive of yourself and what you're capable of and what your foundations look like? And do you feel like you have the kind of foundations to launch yourself from in a way that feels safe, in a way that feels like it's going to aim toward growth and isn't going to like destabilize you? So really looking at how your emotional security attitudes and your material security attitudes are informed by each other, that could be quite helpful for, especially if this Pluto is probably going to have some pretty big designs about your professional life and the direction in which you're growing. So your ambitions basically out in the world, it's going to be working on that in a pretty strong way and increasing that to a pretty large extent. But if your sense of security isn't addressed ahead of time, that could become more complicated up there. So the resilience that you're wanting when it comes to reaching in your ambitions is going to come internally. And it's also going to come from a sense of clarity about what kind of value you bring to the table and your sense of what you're worth and what kind of impact you bring, as well as a clarity around what you value, like what are you trying to get out of your professional life as well. So looking at that intersection of what are you trying to achieve publicly and what does that mean to you internally? That's where a lot of this change is going to take place and a lot of growth as well. Some of this is going to include releasing old ambitions. Pluto can also have something of a purging effect. So if there's anything overgrown here, or if there's anything old that you're just kind of hanging on to out of habit, Pluto's going to address that. It's going to bring that to your attention, which can be quite helpful. It can be kind of more efficient if you're able to let go of some old notions of what you're after so that you're able to build more meaningfully as you're moving forward. But yeah, other than that, finally, with this opposition here between your 4th house and your 10th, we will also have eclipses along these houses. I'm going to start covering that, I think, in like the next video. It's coming up very soon that I'm going to start addressing the fact that the eclipses are going to start happening along these lines too. I would not be surprised if there's something pretty significant coming up in the coming 12 months or so about life, like personal life, like moving, where you're living, your family situation changes impacting your career prospects or vice versa. So for instance, this could be moving for work or changing your work to fit a move or to fit new family priorities. So I would really expect for those things to wind up folding into each other when you're looking at a promotion, for instance. Really consider the impact that it's going to have on your family life or your private life. Maybe there even needs to be something of a restructuring there. Maybe you'll even find that if there's something that you're really reaching for and it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of responsibility on your shoulders for instance, a promotion or something like this, your family may be very willing to fill in the gaps for you on the home front so that you're able to do so more effectively. So I would try and rely on that internal base or that home base, that family base, in order to help you to grow and move forward when it comes to your ambitions. And yeah, with all of that said, again, this alignment is going to take place in this perfect little symmetry toward the end of July. However, this broader pattern is going to be playing out into the summer of 2027 as well, with Jupiter moving away from this alignment, but still in this house. So this should be quite relevant for about a year from this point. And then I also just recently did a video about the fact that these three are then going to stay connected to each other in this way, this little minor grand trine section here, until about 2030. So if you want to check that out, I'll link that in the related videos and the description of the video and in the pinned comment. But yeah, in terms of timetables, that's what we're looking at here. And I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Taurus. So I do hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Gemini, we have this basket aspect pattern developing across your first, third, ninth, and 11th houses. So for you, this is going to be a lot about personal development and expansion, as well as teaching, learning, communication, connection with groups of people and community. So a lot of this is going to anchor on the fact that Uranus is going to be transiting through your first house, which is going to speak to a major personal reinvention, a new version of yourself that you're stepping into, any sort of restrictions or constraints that you have placed upon yourself in the past or have been placed upon you, feeling largely irrelevant at this point. And so stepping outside of all of those boxes, stepping outside of those constraints, getting to know yourself better by being more authentically yourself and not looking outside of yourself for a sense of approval. So really embracing who you are, embracing your changeability, embracing the fact that you grow in phases and stages, as well as the embrace of new personal goals and new personal ideals. And some of this may even have you showing up physically or in how you connect with other people quite differently, in embracing that people are going to be perceiving you differently as you show up differently. Your mindset, your ideas about things may be changing quite substantially in the coming years as we have this outer minor grand trine, this outer planet minor grand trine between Uranus and Neptune and Pluto. This is going to be developing over several years. I just covered this in and of itself in a video, and I'm going to link to that in the description box and the pinned comment under related videos. So this is going to develop more broadly, but we also then have Jupiter coming into your third house, which has to do with how you communicate, how you express yourself, your own personal ideas, where you feel like you fit, the community that you feel like you belong to, your mindset, your ideas about things. And so that's also going to be developing and growing in the coming year as we have Jupiter going through Leo as well, going through your third house. So you're likely to find that there's this proliferation or growth of community around you, connecting with more people, maybe different kinds of communities, different kinds of perspectives, and allowing for yourself, rather than to feel like you need to balance all of these things, allowing for yourself to grow in all of those different directions. So there's a major expansion of your mindset here, an expansion of your understanding. Now, that may point to that you're literally learning about things. So you may feel like you want to take some classes, and that would be absolutely wonderful. There's, in fact, this opposition between Jupiter and Pluto across your third and ninth house axis here. And that's all about learning and teaching. So developing wisdom and then disseminating that wisdom to others as well. So whether that's traditional classes or just studying on your own, that's absolutely wonderful. I would really recommend leaning into that. It's going to be hugely powerful for you, but it could even become quite lucrative for you. Pluto opposite to Jupiter here. We can find a lot of wealth between those two, and those are really highlighting the learning teaching aspects of your chart here. So again, I can only encourage that. You're also likely to learn a lot about your own perspective of the world, of your place in it, of where you belong in that through taking on different types of ideas, different perspectives. And that should be quite natural for you with Gemini placements in your chart to love a sense of diversity of opinion. So this is a time to really embrace that and take that on. You don't need to commit yourself to a specific idea just to understand it. Now, looking at that from this trine perspective as well, with Uranus in your first house saying, be yourself, open yourself up, allow for change, allow yourself to feel liberated. In a trine to Pluto up in your ninth house, which is really reinforcing the significance, the impact, the potency of what you believe about the world. How do you see the world? Do you see it as a place that embraces your personal expansion and your growth, or do you see it as a place that's daunting or scary or is going to reject you if you step out of line or anything like that? Like, the profundity of your worldview is going to be really important here. And so see if you can try to lean into philosophical traditions, to spiritual traditions that encourage growth, that encourage personal evolution and change, that embrace the idea that all different kinds of people and all different kinds of perspectives can have a really wonderful impact on the world, that aren't too restrictive, basically. Because if you are engaging with that kind of mindset, it's just going to make all of the personal change that you're going to be going through, the personal reinvention, which I'm sure I must have, reinvention here. I knew I had to include that word there with Uranus going through the first house, but it's going to make that whole process a lot easier and a lot more natural for you. What else is really wonderful about that? And in fact, what is really affirming of that more positive mindset that you can be embracing here is that we have these really idealistic placements and these like very expansive, affirming placements of Jupiter and Neptune in these social houses, especially when it comes to the groups of people that you're connecting to. So specifically community, people, places, things around you, those that you're communicating with directly in the third house. In the 11th house, this is more of like society, groups of people that you may identify with. And with these really affirming energies here, it's likely that all of the growth that you're experiencing, you should be getting a lot of really excellent feedback for that. You should be getting a lot of people saying, hey, that's awesome. Your new ideas are really excellent, and encouraging you to lean more and more into your sense of authenticity, your authentic voice, your own expansive ideas, and possibly even giving you some feedback about how that is inspiring other people. So not only is it very helpful to you in your growth in this time to embrace a more positive mindset, especially when it comes to your place in the world, but it's actually very true that people around you are going to be more affirming of who you are. Now, not only is there likely to be a lot of kindness, a lot of compassion, a lot of understanding and positive feedback coming through your social connections, there's also likely to just be a proliferation, a major expansion of your social networks, of the friendships that you have that are quite beneficial to you. These could be people opening doors for you. So even if you don't directly know someone who's able to avail an opportunity to you that you may need, if you speak up about the directions in which you're wanting to grow, you may know someone who knows someone. And there's going to be a lot of people around you who want to say yes, who want to open doors to you with these two placements in these social houses. Now, additionally, with all of this, you may not fully know what direction am I growing in and why, but I will say that it's likely that this is going to unfold for you very serendipitously. Like things may just kind of fall into place to lead you in the right direction, to lead you in directions of growth. So I wouldn't so much worry about what is the destination, but rather to avail yourself to opportunities and to a sense of optimism about yourself and your ability to grow, your ability to find a really wonderful place in this world, and to feel really accepted by those around you as well. So even though the long-term plans here may still feel fluid, you may not know exactly what that looks like, you should have a lot of new aspirations, new dreams that you're reaching for. And I would really recommend just reaching for all of them. say yes to things, because even if something is not like the be all and end all, what's fascinating about Neptune is that it can lead us down some extremely fortuitous and very productive detours to where we can pick up on different ideas. We can pick up on different little nuggets of information and knowledge and life experience that ultimately wind up helping us on a different main path that we are actually on but don't quite know it, right? So even though, again, the destination may not be clear, the optimism is going to lead you quite well here toward a sense of greater personal freedom and growth, toward a sense of meaning and purpose, basically, in life here. Additionally, with Pluto in your ninth house, with Neptune in your 11th house, and Jupiter in your third house, it is likely that you're going to be drawn toward more spiritually minded or creative, outside the box thinkers, some very wise, very intelligent people who have just kind of otherworldly knowledge, or again, seem to be perfectly aligned on your path to connect you with new kinds of ideas and vice versa. So not only is there the ability that you have to inspire other people here, but you're also likely to be connecting to much more inspirational people as well. So that is something I would keep an eye open for, is creative, outside the box thinking, very compassionate or cause oriented, spiritual, philosophical kinds of people, because it's likely that they're going to be really well aligned for you in the coming several years, and especially in this year. But yeah, again, finally, I would just say Uranus in your first house, there's going to be some fascinating, wonderful surprises, and perhaps especially in this moment. So what I'm showing right here, where we have this really wonderfully symmetrical alignment of all the planets at 4 degrees, this is going to be late in July of 2026. And you may find that in this moment, there's just all of these opportunities coming through for you that you're really excited about. It may be too much for you to do all in this moment, and that's fine. For one thing, we're going to have all these planets in these houses unfolding as they will. They may not be in this beautiful symmetrical aspect pattern, but they'll still be here working on all the same things, including Jupiter for the coming year until the summer of 2027. But like I said, also these three are going to be here, continuing to open doors, continuing to align to each other for several years to come. So there's going to be plenty of time to let all of this unfold, but it may feel a little overwhelming and super exciting in July of 2026. And yeah, I think that that is pretty much what I have for you, Gemini. It's super exciting. I really hope that you're able to get the best out of it. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Cancer, we have this basket aspect pattern forming around your second, eighth, 10th, and 12th houses. So this is going to be pretty profoundly about notions of security, of the resources that you have available to you, about your public and your professional life, your personal goals, and the resources that you need in order to get you from where you're at to where you're trying to reach to. So I would expect a lot of dwelling on this, thinking about that quite a bit, organizing that, sorting that out quite effectively. But additionally, notions of like the emotional aspects of this. So trust and attachments and your kind of psychological profile, emotional profile, those that are attached to you as well. So the people in your life that may feel like they are dependent on you or vice versa, they're all going to figure into a lot of the transformations that are going on, in particular this year, but even a little bit beyond, for some time to come. So the reason I mentioned that is that we have the Jupiter opposition to Pluto across your second to the eighth house axis. And the second house has to do with your own personal resources. So your finances, the things you own, and your income, surely, but also your emotional and energetic resources, the value that you bring to situations, etc. Also what you value, so what you personally prioritize. And the eighth house up here with Pluto has to do with a lot of that where regards other people. So their values, what they're bringing to the table. Shared resources is one of the more straightforward ways that we just kind of refer to this, but it's a little deeper than that. We can get debts showing up here, again, attachment style, notions of trust, karmic ties, dependencies, vulnerabilities, etc. So this can become somewhat emotional, but ultimately it's about what you have at your disposal and what you're able to utilize. So again, you're sizing that up. You're looking at that quite a bit on both a material and an emotional level here. This could have you effectively with Jupiter in your second house here, looking at any sort of debts that you may have and deciding that you really want to get on top of that and just get rid of it. That may feel like a load off, such that you feel like you have more room to maneuver in your public life as well. So like if there's a move, for instance, I'll give you a very specific example. It might not be this, but feel free to like extrapolate. Say you live in a small town, but you have some debt that you're trying to sort out, and you really want to move to a bigger city so that you have more career prospects, but you feel like you might not be able to manage the increased cost of living in a city plus the debt. So deciding I'm going to buckle down right now, get rid of these debts so that I can make that move and aim toward a bigger future for myself. So something like that, where you want to get the monkey off your back so that you open your future up a little bit more for you. And this would be really effective for something along those lines. Like this Jupiter here could even indicate an increase in your income, but also an increase in your motivation or your sense of optimism about your ability to earn. So, even if it meant taking on extra work, this Jupiter would be very willing to do so in order to get on top of something or to free yourself, to make you feel more internally liberated. So that's going to be a major anchor to this, but we also then have this really lovely trine between Neptune in your 10th house and then Jupiter in your second. So we see the financial aspects here with Jupiter. Up in your 10th house, we have your ambitions. So what is it that you're trying to achieve out in the world on the public level? So there's a lot of optimism and a massive potential, like almost unlimited potential for growth when these two get together like this. So aim high when it comes to your ambitions, your desire for earning specific numbers, doing specific kinds of work that you really love. Be really optimistic about your potential, about visibility, about recognition, about the value that you're bringing and people recognizing that. You may find that this is a year where you feel like things are kind of serendipitously coming together for you when it comes to your career and your earning potential. Now, one thing I will say is this may not be the be all and end all in this year. Neptune still has a while to go in your 10th house, and often it will leave breadcrumbs for you to go in this direction and that in order to achieve maximal growth. And it often does so without a whole bunch of evidence. So for instance, what you're aiming at right now, it may not be specifically the thing that you wind up landing on, but you may actually wind up landing on something, let's say like 5 years down the road, that's even better than what you're aiming at right now. And you may not even be fully aware of the fact that that door or that pathway really is opening to you. It's just that this is the first leg of that pathway, right? So leaving yourself open and again, being really optimistic about your prospects here, trying not to have any sort of self-limiting beliefs get in the way of that. And speaking of self-limiting beliefs, Uranus in your 12th house is going to help with that quite a bit. And the fact that it's at the apex of this very optimistic energy about your financial and career prospects is quite wonderful. So Uranus is going to be coming through here and trying to liberate you from any sort of doubts or negative habits or playing small or conditioning, like psychological conditioning from when you were young, or like being overly attached to maybe controlling people with the trine to Pluto in your 8th house. So this is trying to free you up from anything that would wind up holding you back, but it's on a very, very, very internal level. It's basically working on your belief system about yourself. So you may find that there are a lot of those shifts that are going on internally that are reshaping those professional ambitions. So again, the things that you may have told yourself a few years ago weren't possible for you. This Uranus is going to be trying to remove any sort of scaffolding around that belief system so that you can feel freed from that. And some of this is probably going to come through as like spiritual awakenings, psychological or emotional awakenings, or digging into some kind of life philosophy, or like personal development philosophy that's really working for you and is really giving you a sense of personal liberation. You have a few years or like several years really of this Uranus in here helping with that too. So one thing that is going to be interesting is with this trine between Uranus in the 12th and Pluto in the 8th, is that this can bring some surprise endings, again, purging kind of a quality to these. And it can be extremely potent with lessons and a sense of enlightenment, a sense of these kind of aha moments or breakthroughs that seem to come out of nowhere and may show up as something falling away. It's a major blessing in disguise, if even in disguise. So, for instance, you could have felt really tied to someone. It was maybe a downer, or maybe kind of held you back or held you in, or maybe you felt like you can't reach for something because it's going to make them feel small. And then maybe you're going to have to deal with that, emotional situation or whatever. And they may suddenly fall away from your life. And this can leave you feeling much lighter and much freer to be able to go after what it is that you are wanting. So again, there may just be these serendipitous, like falling away of certain things that are going to wind up holding you back. And a lot of that has to do with this minor grand trine here of like Neptune's trying to lead you forward, and anything that's going to try and get in the way of that is going to have to change and shift and transform, and if necessary, fall away and be split from in order to do so. And this one's going to last for some years. I recently discussed this in a video, which is this little component here, this minor grand trine that I'm pointing to. This is going to be going on solidly until about 2030 and beyond. I will link to the video where I specifically discuss this aspect in the description and in the pinned comment. But what's going on here is that whole configuration there, that whole factor is also getting helped out by Jupiter in your second here. So this is really about recognizing your material security, your material resilience, your ability to conjure up what you need as you need it. So again, if there's any sort of dependencies that need to be worked through here, this is going to help a lot with that. And what else that Jupiter is going to help with when it comes to all this is sometimes we can get a little bit caught up in what other people expect from us or what they value about us, what we conceive of as like valuable to other people, and prioritizing that over what we ourselves truly value. So rather than say like trying to keep up with the Joneses or trying to do what we ought to do or trying to fit into the little boxes or whatever, Jupiter is trying to point to a sense of personal growth that you are able to experience when you value your own perspective rather than the perspectives of others and pursue that and grow within that, rather than looking for approval or acceptance or acknowledgement or recognition of the validity of your values outside of yourself. Because sometimes we can run into issues out there. If we do that, often what other people are going to tell us we should value is actually beneficial to them more so than us, right? So Jupiter is really giving you a lot of permission to come back to yourself, come back to your own drawing board and say, what is it that I want for like 5 years from now? What is it that I want 20 years from now? What do I want my life to look like? And how do I get myself closer to that without letting anything hold me back? And through that process, you can really clarify what is currently holding you back and what, for instance, you might need to let go of and maybe cut ties with. But yeah, I think that's a lot of what I want to cover here for you. Like I said in the intro, but some people skip to timestamps, this particular configuration where it's all symmetrical and beautiful at 4 degrees, this is in late July. However, we will have Jupiter going through this area of the sky and kind of continuing on with this story all the way until next summer. And then additionally, like I mentioned, these 3 are going to stay configured to each other for several years to come. And I covered that in its own video as well. So in terms of timetables, we're kind of dealing with multiple here. In particular, July of 26, summer of 26 to summer of 27, and then continuing on a bit from there over the coming several years. So there's no rush here, basically. But yeah, that is what I have for you, Cancer. So I really hope that you enjoy this transit. This is something that as a Gemini rising, I am kind of coming out of a lot of very similar energy. And I can tell you, it looks a little wonky from the inside, but it is doing a lot of really wonderful work for you. So I do hope that it treats you well. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right. So for Leo, we have this basket configuration developing between your first, seventh, ninth, and 11th houses. So for you, this is going to be a lot about personal growth and development, learning more about yourself and your place in the world and growing within that, as well as your social connections, collaborations, mutually beneficial connections, influence, etc. So, with Jupiter going through your first house, this is going to be ongoing from the summer, from the end of June of 2026 to July of 2027. So, for a solid year, you're going to have Jupiter in your first house. And this is going to build up a lot of confidence and courage in you to be expressive, to really embrace yourself, to really enjoy yourself, to prioritize your own personal goals and personal development and growth and expansion. And that is going to configure to Neptune very nicely, which is in your ninth house. And this is quite literally the place of the expansion of your horizons. So this is the place of your perspective on the world, your worldview, your philosophy, your range of life experience. And both of these have these kind of growth factors to them, both Jupiter and Neptune. So you're likely to feel that this is a period of time where you are massively expanding your perspective of the world, your idealism about the world, your sense of belonging, your sense of fascination and inspiration when it comes to the world and how people interact with each other, and your place within that, your aspiration within the world. So you're likely to feel yourself naturally reaching higher in this period of time and experiencing, again, just significant personal expansion, a lot of increased confidence, a sense of feeling recognized by those outside of you, and possibly connecting with more idealistic people, more unconventional thinkers as well, that are able to reflect back to you a lot of the growth that you're going through this time, opening a lot of doors, maybe around travel or around education, learning about new perspectives that are more idealistic, that maybe feel less restricted or less pessimistic even. So you may even be like happening upon certain philosophical traditions or things like this that you're getting really into. And there may be communities around that as well that are helpful to your experience of digging into that. You may also find yourself personally really inspired through this period of time, like really leaning into belief and gratitude, a sense of belonging, a sense of feeling guided. And so you may find that a lot of these opportunities find their way to you very serendipitously. So new beliefs, new spiritual paths, you may just happen upon these things. And any sort of educational pursuits that seem to present themselves to you, I would also really recommend leaning into that, exploring that, whether that is in a traditional setting or not. You may even find that there's an opportunity for you to teach others or for you to disseminate your knowledge, your wisdom to other people as well. And that could be through teaching or publishing, public speaking, anything along those lines, any way to just get your ideas to other people and to inspire other people through those ideas. So yeah, that's what's going on in terms of a huge amount of personal expansion through this time. But we also then have these big change makers, Pluto and Uranus, across these social houses of yours. So Pluto brings a sense of deep transformation, fundamental change, looking at things differently due to understanding the dynamics that are involved. You may find that you naturally understand how people mirror you and vice versa more naturally. Like you understand the power dynamics in the connections that you're witnessing and the people that you're connecting to more deeply. And that can help you to kind of suss out who you're wanting to spend your time with, who you're not. So I would really have your antenna out and picking up on how is it that people make you feel? Do you feel embraced and accepted? And do you feel encouraged by other people? Do you feel like there's a sense of competition there? I would really be following those instincts because they're going to be more naturally available to you as Pluto's going through your seventh house. And that's also then going to feed into some of these major realignments in your personal relationships and partnerships. You may find that the people that you're connected to are able to open bigger doors for you or offer greater opportunities for you because they may be gaining an influence, or you may be connecting to new people who are more influential than those that you've connected to before. And maybe this is through networking. This could just be along the lines of career, of connecting with new groups of people. And some of those in there, you're making a really excellent impression. You have a really great attitude with them. And so therefore they're saying, hey, there's this opportunity I know about. It could help you out quite a bit. Or it could be deeper than that. It could wind up speaking to people who are not only able to mirror to you your sense of experience and wisdom and knowledge, but are also then able to feed that to you. So people who know things that are novel to you, but deeply meaningful. So basically, the keys for personal transformation, some of those are going to be held by other people in the coming several years. And through your willingness to connect with new people, to hear people out, you could find that you're able to learn through those connections. Learn about yourself and your place in the world. And again, any sort of social dynamics and stuff, which Pluto tends to bring up. But that's also then interacting with this Uranus in your 11th house. This is more along the lines of groups of people rather than one-on-one partnerships and relationships like we see in the 7th. So organizations, social causes that people gather around, so beliefs that people gather around as well. This is also a place of like hopes, dreams, aspirations, the groups that you identify with and that you want to identify with. So there's a lot of novelty and liberation with Uranus going through this place. So that's how it brings change. It can be quite quickly, but ultimately it's about a sense of liberation. So if you have felt like you need to get approval outside of yourself for being yourself, or if you have felt inhibited at all in your connections with people, if you felt like I would love to really be myself and just wave my flag, but maybe you are quite spiritual and you feel like that is judged within the circles that you've run in, or whatever it is along those lines. Sure, we've all had experiences like that. This can wind up connecting you to people where you are just able to really be authentically yourself, and you don't have to worry or think about, am I going to be judged here? It's about experimenting with new groups that can introduce new expansive ideas to you. It's about availing yourself to different organizations or different groups of people or new social causes. So like getting involved in new social circles is really encouraged as a major part of all of this as well. And you may find that through experimenting with different social circles and getting into new environments, that you're actually able to develop some really powerful connections, some really deep connections with other people that may wind up lasting a lifetime. You may even find that through connecting with new groups of people that this winds up going hand in hand with growing with or apart from other people. So that's one aspect of Pluto as well, is that it can speak to an evolution. And sometimes that splits you from other people. In the 7th house with Pluto there may be some falling away or transformation of your relationships in the sense of like no longer connecting with certain people. But if that is a factor in all of this, I wouldn't worry about it because there's so many new people to connect with along the path that you're going on now. So yeah, I would really expect that you're going to be developing quite a few new connections in this time. One thing with Pluto in the 7th is it can encourage some boundaries. I would encourage some strong boundaries there. Keep in mind, again, the mirroring dynamic that goes on with other people. Also, keep an eye open for competitive types of people. That may not be the healthiest thing, considering this is also really encouraging you to be idealistic. So if you can keep the connections that you have as clean as possible so that they don't wind up interfering with that, that would be ideal. And another little factor here, this can have a lot to do with like networking professionally, and that's wonderful in terms of influence. But with Neptune up in the 9th and then Uranus up in the 11th, there may be something here about connecting with more spiritually minded or philosophically minded people, or people who are really involved in a cause or in a belief system or something like this. So that may be a key to developing this new path of yours and to your sense of personal growth and personal acceptance as well. So I'll just throw that out there. But yeah, I think that that is pretty much what I have for you, Leo. It's a very, very, very exciting time. Like I said, this is going to be, Jupiter is going to be going through your first house for about a year. I recently discussed that. Additionally, I discussed this little configuration, the sub-configuration within this broader aspect pattern between the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, because that's going to be ongoing for several years between the three of them. So I recently discussed that, and I will link to both of those videos in the description box and in the pinned comment under related videos. But this particular really beautiful symmetrical configuration between Jupiter and Pluto and Neptune and Uranus, all at 4 degrees, this is going to be sharpest in late July. So there's kind of multiple levels to how this is going to wind up playing out. And there's no need to like crunch time or rush through any of this because it is part of a broader kind of unfolding of you. So yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Leo. I hope that this configuration treats you wonderfully. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Virgo, we have this basket aspect pattern forming between your 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th houses here. So we'll look at this in different kinds of components here and then bring it all together because basically what we have going on is definite shifts and changes in your working life and your career path, your ambitions, your responsibilities, basically, is what that's going to wind up coming down to. And then we have this really like optimistic flowing energy more on like the spiritual or the emotional plane for you. And this is going to be quite psychological in its dynamic. It's going to be speaking to a desire to like free yourself internally and grow internally, maybe like philosophically or spiritually. So this is all going to wind up flowing together in a really fascinating way where it's the behind the scenes kind of healing, personal development. Those internal breakthroughs are very likely to be strangely helpful to you in your career and in your responsibilities and your daily habits and stuff. So on the like external visible level, what we're most likely to see is that you're going to have some shifts in your work, your habits, your health habits as well. So what does your working day look like? Have you been dealing with burnout recently? This is going to help you quite a bit to recognize that and make the changes that are necessary along those lines. Now, these may have you really amped up and really like following through pretty intensely on your work. So your work ethic may actually be really strong. But what's helpful about these is that it's likely to push you into positions where you're able to feel a little freer with like what your day looks like and have a little bit more control over what your responsibilities are and how you order those and prioritize those. So hopefully that can give you a little bit of wiggle room such that you're able to manage your energy levels as well. You may find that there is some kind of unexpected shift or change in your like recognition or in your career path. So there could be a promotion here. There could be like restructuring where you're needing to take on different roles. This could be an opportunity presenting itself to you. So someone may know of a position even within a different company or in a different field if there's a bigger change that you're wanting to make here. So I would keep your feelers out there. It's going to be pretty hard to avoid these things, but having some level of clarity about what you want to be aiming at, what you want to be doing in your daily life, what you want to be responsible for, what kind of work you enjoy versus what is that aspect of your work that maybe you dread, and trying to restructure along those lines is going to help this energy to flow a lot more effectively and feel a bit more like it's in your own hands too. Additionally, on the health front here, this opposition is going to be somewhat interesting because it's going to help you to understand how your internal state is reflected in your physical state. So, for instance, we could see like, how are you doing psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and the impact that that's having on your physical body. So, for instance, if there is a sense of pessimism that you've gotten kind of used to, or trying not to get too like pie in the sky about things and blah, 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 and like almost trying to hold yourself in a little bit or not get too excited about things, etc. Sometimes we can physically embody that and kind of be smaller and shrink down a little bit. And you could find that, oh, if I'm just more optimistic with Jupiter moving into the 12th house, this is a sense of internal optimism and feeling like, wait, things are going kind of smoothly here, then you may find that you're feeling that in your body more and that you're able to have more movement, that you feel a bit less inclined to the dread based burnout, right? So you may still be working quite hard, but if you have a lot of optimism with that and with where that's leading you, that can feel physically quite a bit different. You may even find that there's some stuff going on internally that's affecting your immune system, and that if you're able to sort that out, and maybe this is even literally on the level of your immune system, environmental sensitivities, allergies, any sort of inflammation or things like that, can become clearer with this opposition here. So I would pay attention to those kinds of low level invisible things that can kind of build up. And if it's good, then it helps you out a lot. So for instance, if the inflammation's low, if the immune system is pretty solid, but not reacting to you in a rough way, then you can feel quite good. But if that's out of balance, then it can just kind of make everything a little bit more difficult. So yeah, I would be looking at that, make sure any sort of nutritional gaps are covered and so forth. But additionally, like, how are you feeling on the spiritual level? So do you feel fulfilled when it comes to your sense of meaning in your life with your connections? Do you feel like those are out of balance at all? Do you feel like those are very supportive of you? You're likely able to intuit in an extremely beneficial way how your attachments are impacting you and how the energies around you influence you as well. So any sort of like vulnerabilities that you may lean into or you may lean away from, the cords that you have, basically, those you're likely able to see a little bit more intuitively and tap into more effectively. So that's also then going to help with carrying yourself differently such that you're more effective in your responsibilities and more capable of creating the change that you're wanting to see when it comes to your career path and your ambitions. Additionally, out in this area, this little minor grand trine component here is going to be bringing up notions of your working life, your public life, your responsibilities, and trust. And do you trust to share with others? Do you trust what other people are saying about your resources and things like this? So for instance, will you work hard on a promise of a raise and a promotion? Or do you kind of doubt that when someone makes an offer like that or makes an argument in that direction, and maybe kind of subtly pull away from situations like that? So remaining open to what people are saying about resources that could be available to you, I think, is also going to help with this to an extent. Now, that said, of course, not necessarily like not giving money, like not a get rich quick scheme or giving your money away in order to create more money. I wouldn't say that that's the greatest, because this has to do with your work and your responsibilities more so. But do you feel like you trust those around you? Do you feel like you trust those in positions of authority? Do you trust your coworkers? How are those relationships doing? How those are doing is going to have a pretty strong impact on your financial situation with this as well. So those emotional and financial bonds are going to require some level of balance, and maybe trying not to be too skeptical in that direction. Try to remain open, because Neptune can do some fascinating things at times, and there may be a promise made here that's genuine and that could wind up opening a lot of really wonderful doors for you and create a sense of a lot of shared material growth with others. So these three together could even be helping you to trust others more, especially if you've been let down in that area before. This is likely to help you to see what people are actually doing rather than just going on what they're saying, and to establish a sense of trust that can help you to grow and keep more opportunities open for you. So yeah, when it comes to burnout, releasing some of those old patterns, like I said, these two may actually, and this Uranus as well, it may actually be in having you really enjoy, especially like working on things behind the scenes and then presenting them, or doing your thing and then combining that with what other people are working on and doing your best, like doing really quality work and then sharing it with others. So you may feel quite motivated, but again, the pattern of work is different because it's very optimistic. So renegotiating your lifestyle, you may still be working the same amount, but that Jupiter there is really encouraging a sense of optimism. And finally, when it comes to all of these different placements, this can help a lot too with freeing yourself from any sort of confusing dependencies that you may have, with developing an internal resilience and a desire to be very self reliant so that you feel like you are more in control of your future and your prospects. So when it comes to renegotiating your lifestyle, it's basically taking that more in your own hands and running with that and understanding that you can control that through your positive attitude and your optimism and your willingness to put effort toward the goals that you have, underpinned by that sense of self-belief. Yeah, I think that's kind of a lot of what I want to say with this for you. This little beautiful symmetrical alignment here, this is going to take place in late July of 2026, but we will still have Jupiter moving through this house until next summer. So summer of 26 to summer of 27. It's going to be pretty much the same story along those lines until then. There's likely to be a significant moment in this process in July. And then additionally, we have this minor grand trine. This is playing out for several years till at least like 2030 or so, and even a little bit beyond that. I covered that in its own video as well, since that will be functioning and actually has been functioning without the contribution of Jupiter more recently. I will link to that under the related videos in the description and in the pinned comment as well if you want to dig into that a little bit more. But yeah, again, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Virgo. So I do hope that these transits treat you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right. So for Libra, we have this basket aspect pattern developing across your fifth, seventh, ninth, and 11th houses. So for you, this is going to be fundamentally about personal growth, personal expansion, as well as your social connections. So we will see Jupiter developing through your 11th house and encouraging a lot of collaborations with different people, encouraging a sense of belonging, a sense of possibility and inspiration, hope, optimism about your life, generally speaking, but also you and how you fit into the groups that you belong to. So, finding your tribe is one of the things that Jupiter in the 11th house can really speak to. And what's really wonderful about that, this expansion of your social circle here and the like idealization of that. So, connecting with more idealistic people, more gregarious, more affirming kinds of people who are quite warm hearted. That's also then going to connect with Neptune, which is in your 7th house. And that's going to reflect a lot of similar attitudes, a lot of idealism, people that feel really serendipitously connected to you. So connecting with people who may put you on a pedestal and vice versa. That is something I would maybe keep an eye open for, is not over idealizing the people that you're connecting to, but there's going to be a real desire to do so based on who it is that you're connecting to and the good vibes, the good feelings in those connections. So even if you do slip up and, over idealize a little bit and vice versa, still it's a really nice feeling to have. It's a really wonderful feedback loop to develop with other people of wanting to affirm each other, of wanting to lift each other up, of wanting to believe in each other. So you're able to develop some really wonderful, mutually beneficial connections, even just along the lines of moral support, community support, groups that are supportive of each other, that make you feel like you're able to contribute to something bigger than yourself as well. So friendships are likely to really thrive under this influence. You're likely to find any sort of resources that you're needing along social lines that should be available to you. So if you need help with something, if you need an opportunity to become available to you, I would be talking to people. It's likely that they will just happen to know someone who's able to help you out, or they may be able to directly help you out. So on the social front here, you're likely to find a lot of affirmation, a lot of yeses. You may even find that you're connecting with people who are more philosophical or more spiritual, more creative even. So they may literally be artists that you're connecting with. People who are very charitable to others, very compassionate. There's a real kindness in this trine between these two planets. And again, a huge amount of expansion. And what's cool about this too is that then we have Pluto and Uranus, which are these major transformative change makers along the lines of your personal expansion and personal expression and growth. So you are also growing by leaps and bounds as you're connecting with really wonderful people that should be encouraging that in you as well. So there may be something of a creative awakening that you may have even been experiencing over recent years as Pluto's been edging into your fifth house here. But as these other planets wind up finally aligning to that Pluto, you may feel like you're able to really work with this more, like you're able to find, okay, this is how I can plug this into my life in a real way now. So maybe this is developing a creative skill, developing a lot of inspiration, and then learning about that, learning the techniques maybe of a specific kind of art or something along those lines. It could even be something social that you're wanting to learn about, or again, something spiritual that you're wanting to learn about, a specific tradition or a specific philosophical perspective that you could be really fascinated by. And the novelty of interest of yours, because so this Uranus, it brings a lot of novelty, change, liberation, but it's in this place of the higher mind, as well as the expansion of your horizons. So often topics of interest show up here in the ninth house that wind up broadening your life experience through learning. Sometimes this also comes through travel and connecting with new and different kinds of people and their perspectives and so forth. But it's tied into this Pluto, which is transforming how you express yourself as well as how you experience joy and pleasure. So there could be something that is just deeply fascinating you, that may be a new topic, something you're learning about, studying, or even teaching. Like this could be the development of a creative skill through teaching it, even. And you may even find that this comes through with sudden opportunities to expand your horizon. So to travel or to maybe be invited to connect with new groups. Someone may say, hey, do you want to take this class with me? This could be an opportunity to publish or to do public speaking or something like that, disseminating your ideas. I would take all of those opportunities that may in the moment feel a bit big for you. It may feel a little bit daunting. I would really embrace those because it's likely that you're going to develop a huge amount of personal resilience and confidence in your expression and in your joy and pleasure, in your inspiration through availing yourself to those new opportunities. This travel as well, it doesn't even have to be too far away. It could just be new stomping grounds, people and places, faces that you're unfamiliar with. And through connecting to new people in that way, you may find some really wonderful people that winds up encouraging your personal growth, especially in such a way that is going to encourage you to share of your talents publicly and feel confident in doing so. So yeah, ultimately, what I would really encourage here is there's a lot of personal growth available to you if you open yourself up to new friendships, new groups, new causes that you may be stirred by, inspiration, leaning into that inspiration, making time for it, prioritizing it. Not feeling like you just need to stay in like the rat race, staying on the treadmill, but opening yourself up to really inspiring or meaningful connections as well. These aspects of life that really make it worth living. So if you've been feeling in recent years a little stuck in the rut or focused so strongly on your responsibilities, this would be a time to really take some of that weight off your shoulders and really start to pursue what you love and let your heart guide you into new connections and new opportunities. Finally, any expressive interests that you have, writing, art, teaching, anything like that, I would really encourage leaning in that direction as well. And lastly, if you do have children or there are children around that figure quite prominently in your life, they may also find a sense of personal transformation through connecting with you. You may find that you have a really wonderful influence on them, and they may even be spurring some of this in you. So, for instance, this could be a generational thing. If there are young people around you doing their unique young people stuff, right? Experimenting with different genres or different interests or whatnot that may be unfamiliar to you, they may encourage you to get into something that's new that you haven't connected with yet. And I would encourage exploring those avenues as well. The fifth house is also a place of the inner child, and Pluto can be quite psychological. So it may be digging up some aspects of your own inner child and introducing that to you through the children that are around you as well, and helping you to open that up through those connections. So I wouldn't look at that as just like frivolous or silly or anything like that. That's what I would really fundamentally be embracing. But yeah, I think that that is a lot of what I have for you, Libra. It's such a wonderful set of alignments. I've been saying to you guys for the past couple of years, I think I might find that this alignment is my favorite of all. So just to clarify some of the timing on this too, the Pluto, Neptune, Uranus configuration, this little segment of the broader aspect pattern here, this is actually going to hold for several years. I did just talk about this in a recent video. And like I said, Jupiter is going to be in Leo for about a year. I also did a video separately on that as well. So if you want to dig into some of the components of this a little deeper, I'll link to those in the related videos section of the description and the pinned comment. And then this really beautiful symmetrical configuration at 4 degrees of all these different signs. This is going to be perfecting in late July of 2026, but all of this is going to be playing out over the course of a year. And then this configuration out here is going to continue to develop for several years. So just to clarify some of the layers of timing that we're dealing with. But yeah, I do hope that you're able to enjoy this configuration. I think it's absolutely wonderful. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Scorpio, we have this basket aspect pattern developing across your 4th, 6th, 8th, and 10th houses. So this is a very fascinating alignment. It has a lot to do with your deeper emotional connections with people, dependencies, vulnerabilities, family relationships, committed relationships, as well as your working life and your career path, your ambitions, and your public life. So off the bat, what we see here is for sure there's going to be something significant about work-life balance. We can see that with this opposition between Jupiter and Pluto. So Pluto, in the 4th house, this is the place of your home, your family, your private life, your emotional security, those connections there. And then the 10th house has to do with your ambitions, your public life, your reputation, and if you have a traditional career path, your career. So the future that you have laid out for you. And so we can see there's an opposition there between two very formidable planets. So you may feel, perhaps especially around July, but particularly in this coming year, Jupiter's going to stay in this area generally for the coming year as well, that there is a lot that you have on your plate in the public sector and then also in your private life. So you may find that there's a lot of push and pull there. You may find that you're needing to work a little harder to maintain a sense of balance along those lines. And I don't think that this is something that you necessarily dread. I think that this is something that you could be quite excited about. There may be some significant changes within your home and family that are impacting your career prospects or vice versa, to where they're kind of folding in on each other. I will discuss it, I think, in the next video. It's coming up pretty soon that I'm going to start talking about the eclipses, which are also about to shift into these houses, your 4th and 10th houses. So that's just going to reinforce the kind of push-pull quality of this and the like folding in on each other, your personal private life and your career, your public life. So that is going to be very significant here. But a different way of looking at this is that we have these emotional connections here are undergoing a lot of change. So your 8th house has to do with dependencies, your shared resources, so your commitments to other people, sometimes debts and taxes and things like that. Financial arrangements tend to show up in the 8th house too, but we can even see this on an emotional level, like emotional bonds to people, relationships that feel karmically tied as well. So those deeper connections. The trine here between Uranus, which can bring some surprising shifts and changes, but also some very liberatory shifts and changes to these connections of yours, being in a trine to Jupiter, which is it's deeply transforming your family life, your home life, your emotional foundations. It may even have you looking psychologically at your family line and maybe some things that have been passed down or what roles you played within family and how that then winds up impacting your attachment style to different people or your commitments to people. So there may be like family financial commitments that are coming into the picture here, for better or worse. And there is opportunity for change. So if that feels very limiting, if you feel like this is a yoke that you want to throw off of yourself, if there is an overcommitment or an over dependency, this can help you to change that or to remove that from your life, to shift away from that if you are wanting to be more independent. But additionally, this could have you looking at that psychological foundation there and helping you to understand your own attachment style such that you are able to build more trusting connections with people and financial arrangements that you feel like you can depend on better or more comfortably going forward. Additionally, if there's any sort of family debts or taxes that need to get sorted out, if there's land taxes, property taxes, that you are wanting to see some changes around, you could also effectuate that with this trine. So these changes here, they are able to help you to create a sense of a foundation, resources, be they like property resources, family resources, or shared resources that are able to help you with your long-term ambitions, with your desire for growth in your public life, so in your career. So for instance, this could be family offering you a solid foundation to plug any sort of gaps that you feel are necessary in order to enable you to take advantage of career opportunities that are availing themselves to you. This could be your family being willing to move for a job opportunity that you have that is farther afield, or this could be your family life changing in such a way that opens you up. Like, for instance, if you have a partner that needs to move for a career opportunity, that could actually open up some doors to you when it comes to your career growth as well. So it may be that you're both able to make steps up in your career, but through the necessity of one or the other of you moving for each other. So that's what's going on there. And I haven't even quite touched on this trine here, which is super lovely. So with Neptune in a trine to Jupiter, this tends to point to unlimited growth or removal of the limitations or restrictions on growth when we get these two working together. So there could be like serendipitous opportunities for recognition, for leadership roles, and you may need to put yourself in positions to where you are learning as you go. Sometimes Neptune can be a little bit confusing. It can be a little bit foggy. It can be like, what am I doing here? And what is it that I'm reaching for? You may just have this vague notion of, I know that if I avail myself to this opportunity, that it could create a lot of growth for me down the road. You might not know exactly what that looks like. You may not know exactly what all responsibilities that's going to entail, but this does point to the opportunities that are available to you at this point, definitely legitimately offering a sense of growth. So your sense of optimism about your responsibilities, your willingness to take those things on, your willingness to really pour your heart and soul into your work, into the quality of your work, should be creating avenues of a huge amount of recognition for you. So I also would not be surprised. Jupiter going through the 10th house tends to speak to promotions and raises and getting recognized by those in positions of authority. But a lot of that, again, is going to be about attitudes. It's going to be about a willingness to like take other people, teammates under your wing, work compassionately and sympathetically with other people. So the way that you carry yourself is going to have a huge impact on all of this as well. So yeah, ultimately what we have here is a lot of opportunity for change when it comes to your emotional commitments, your family relationships, any sort of shared resources. If you need to buy or sell property, there's pretty strong indications around that going well here. But that is all also supporting a sense of unlimited growth when it comes to your career path here and opening doors for you along those lines. So for instance, you may want to look farther afield for opportunities. You may want to avail yourself to career paths that will pull you away from where you're at and will require you to lay a new foundation. Staying flexible in that way and staying open-minded, staying optimistic about your prospects here is going to be really wonderful. You may even find that there are some opportunities for passive income here as well. Uranus in the eighth house can indicate some windfall, certainly. So maybe there's even something about an inheritance that is going to help you financially so that you're able to make the changes to your working life that you didn't think were possible. There could be a settlement or something like that, like money just coming in that winds up helping to free you up. But additionally, some of what you may be doing here is opening yourself up to more lucrative opportunities that you don't need to work quite as hard for as well, with Neptune in the sixth house and a sextile to Uranus in the eighth. Passive income shows up in the eighth house as well. But yeah, I think that that is a lot of what I have for you, Scorpio. It's quite a fascinating alignment. Again, keep in mind, try and keep your eyes on the work-life balance. Try and make sure that that is healthy and that that's still effective. You may feel very motivated to stay deeply involved in your family life, but to also really reach for some major career opportunities as well. Ask for help. You may be surprised at the willingness of others to like share of their energy to make sure that this is going to work out for you well. I'd also just generally pay attention to like your immune system and things like that. If you are burning the candle at both ends, make sure you're filling any sort of like nutritional or supplemental gaps or things like that. And finally, one last little thing, paying attention to how people's energy hits you. So do you enjoy being around a certain person or not? There may be more to that than you are fully cognizant of. And so I would say try not to sweep that under the rug. Even if this is someone that you have to be around sometimes, maybe you can limit that or at least be aware of that. Maybe put up some emotional walls so that they have less of an effect on you. But yeah, paying attention to the impact on an emotional level for you of the energies that you're connecting to is also going to be pretty wise to getting the best out of this. But yeah, with all of that said, just clarifying some of the timing here, because I know some people hop to the timestamps. We have this really beautiful symmetrical basket alignment at 4 degrees of all the signs. This is going to be happening in late July. Jupiter will stay in Leo until the summer of 2027. So we're going to have this story generally playing out for a while after July. And then Jupiter will move on. But these three will stay not only in these signs and in these houses of yours, but they'll stay configured to each other in this way, which is called a minor grand trine, this little component here. And I just covered that recently in a video of its own, which is going to be linked in the related videos and the description and in the pinned comment. Those are going to stay configured to each other for several years to come. So there's not too much of a rush when it comes to all of this, but I do expect for 26, 27 to be really foundational in a lot of the shifts that are going to be coming for several years to come. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Scorpio. So I do hope that these transits treat you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Sagittarius, we have the basket aspect pattern forming between your third, fifth, seventh, and ninth houses. So this for you is fundamentally going to be about personal growth and your social connections. So you are likely to see a lot of expansion in this year around your sense of your worldview, your perspective on life, and your perspective of your place in the world, how you're capable of growing and who you are growing into. And that's likely to change how you're connecting with the world, how you're connecting with the people around you as well. And there's a lot of optimism, a lot of idealism in your sense of your conception of the world that's coming in as well. And that's going to tie in quite nicely to Neptune, which is going through your fifth house here, which has to do with your sense of personal expression, your interests, your joys, your passions, your pleasures, your hobbies. So these two are going to be working together quite well. Your higher mind, your sense of the expansion of your horizons, as well as your sense of pleasure, joy, interest. So you're likely to find that there's a huge idealism within you this coming year, especially around your creative interests, your expression, what you know, what you want to share with the world, what you want to express of yourself. You're likely to get a lot of really positive reinforcing feedback as you're expressing that as well. So getting to know yourself more and finding that you like yourself quite a bit as well with Neptune in the fifth and Jupiter in the ninth. Now, you may have some really wonderful opportunities along all these lines too to pursue either like leisure, so getting out and exploring new places, connecting with new kinds of people, new communities, getting to know yourself more that way, or through learning about new topics and getting really into them. Like I said, fascination is going to play into this quite a bit. So you're going to want to learn about things, you're going to want to dig into things, understand things, not just more info or more data points, but understand things more holistically and what it means for you. So, for instance, I'll just give you a really specific example. If you were studying some period of history that you were getting really into, and maybe you're doing this on your own, maybe you're doing this within a classroom context, regardless, you're likely to see yourself or certain aspects of the world today and your place in it in what you're learning about there. So you're likely to find that as you continue to expand your mind, that you're kind of finding more aspects of yourself out there in the world as well. So your sense of self is really growing and expanding. You may also find with these two here, they can stir up Neptune and Jupiter. They can stir up a lot of inspiration, and they're in these very inspired houses as well. So you may find yourself even inspired to study philosophy and spirituality and specific, maybe spiritual or philosophical or even ideological perspectives, but doing so from a place of idealism. So who knows? Like maybe this is even a kind of utopian philosophy that you're getting into, or even literature. You may also find that there is an opportunity to share of all this fascination that's building up in you. So you may find that there are teaching opportunities available to you or publishing. So just sharing of disseminating your knowledge, your understanding. I would recommend taking advantage of those opportunities. Those are also going to be major growth opportunities. That could also be writing. Pluto is in your third house, and that's also playing into all of this. And this is the place of your community, people, places, things around you, but also communication, writing, speaking, learning. So you may find that this Pluto, which has been here, it's been kind of developing over the past couple of years. It may have been stirring up some deeper thought about how you communicate and how you might improve upon that, either for the sake of like connecting with people better or expressing yourself more authentically, or doing so like expressing yourself from a place of empowerment rather than maybe being like a little bit self-deprecating or something along those lines. So you may have been thinking about how you connect with people and how you communicate about people, about yourself over the past couple of years. Now, as the rest of the planets are catching up to that Pluto there and aligning with it, you may feel like you're actually able to utilize this now. Like you're able to put it into practice, or you're able to experiment with this. Maybe this is coming into some new partnerships, some new friendships, some new connections that you're developing with Uranus, bringing a lot of novelty to your one-on-one partnerships and your collaborations. So you may be connecting with new friends, and you may just be approaching those connections differently than you have in the past. And so experimenting with this new version of yourself, with this new, more idealistic perspective of yours. And again, you should be getting some really wonderful feedback for all of this. There is likely to be a lot of turnover or, again, novelty, proliferation of your connections with other people with these big change makers in social houses. So Uranus brings a lot of pretty quick change and liberatory change. So it's almost this refreshing or renewal kind of change. Whereas Pluto brings a lot of like deeper transformation, where your community itself is fundamentally changing and the people that you're directly connecting with are different, maybe even somewhat unconventional. So as your social life is shifting, changing, experiencing some turnover, really try and feed that excitement, that lust for life that you're developing internally into those connections as well. You're likely to see a lot of really excellent feedback loops there. You may even find that you are developing all of this inspiration and excitement and fascination with life and with new ideas and everything, but that it's almost like there's this permission structure from the outside of connecting with unconventional people, maybe people who think about things really deeply or people who are quite brilliant, that are able to either give you some missing pieces to the puzzle of this new version of yourself, or are inspiring to you because they're different. You feel like, okay, I can step outside of this little box as well. So feeling a sense of liberation from the people that you're connecting with. So they may be saying, hey, yeah, who cares if other people do that or not? If you like it, that's cool and you should do that. You may also find that through these new interests of yours, and these could be creative or again, philosophical, etc., that those are bringing you into more creative or outside the box thinkers as well. And they may be then reinforcing those new interests of yours. So do see, I would recommend, I should say, if you can connect with people who are in communities that are centered around these new interests of yours, or that are a little bit more idealistic or more community oriented. There's probably plenty here for you to stay perfectly fascinated by life in your own lane. But if you share of that, I think there's going to be a lot extra that you're able to get out of this new personal growth that you're experiencing. Finally, with Jupiter this year, from this July to next July, that's going to be going through Leo. So these outer planets, Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, they'll be ongoing and they'll be connected to each other in this little configuration portion here for several years. We do have one solid year from this summer to next summer with Jupiter also in Leo up in your ninth house. And then this particular configuration that I'm showing you, that centers around July of 2026. So there's different layers to how this is going to wind up unfolding. But for the coming year or so, this Jupiter is also really going to be encouraging travel or getting outside of your usual stomping grounds or outside of familiar territory. So I would also really recommend just going to places that you haven't been before, even if it's local, or even if it's like a different kind of social media or a different way of connecting with people, or taking courses and classes and meeting like-minded people through that. And doing something unusual and getting yourself outside of what's familiar to you, I think is going to be a really important part of this new unfolding of yourself in the coming year plus. But yeah, I think that's a lot of what I have for you, Sagittarius. I did just cover this little configuration here between the outer planets in a video of its own, since that's going to be ongoing for some years. So if you want to check that out, that will be in the related videos in the description and in the pinned comment. I also talked about Jupiter on its own in Leo recently, if you want to dig into some of the pieces of this a little further. But other than that, I really hope that this configuration treats you wonderfully. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Capricorn, we have this basket aspect pattern developing in your second, fourth, sixth, and eighth houses. So this is a very fascinating combination here. What we have is we have a couple of like material life based houses showing up here. Your responsibilities tend to show up in the sixth house, and then your resources and financial life on a personal level tend to show up in the second house here. And then we have Neptune in the place of your home, family, your emotional core and security and so forth. And then we have Jupiter up in the place of like shared resources, dependencies, debts, things along those lines, trust, etc. So this is going to be an interesting one. We can definitely see there's an opposition here between Pluto in your second house and Jupiter in your eighth. And this is really bringing into the whole picture notions of security. So you're probably going to be asking yourself a lot of questions here and be presented with notions of what you value, what you prioritize, what gives you a sense of security, safety, and that of others. So the values of other people, what they are bringing to the table, sharing with them, how they manage resources, how you manage resources, and whether you feel like you're on the same page along those lines, whether you feel like you trust those that you are deeply connected to during this time. So that's going to figure into this quite strongly, is your sense of your priorities versus how your priorities mix with others. And we also then have this component here that I want to mention, which is like the deeper connections, the deeper relationships that you have, the like commitments to people, which show up across the fourth and the eighth houses. So this is going to be drawing up a lot of questions, notions about your emotional connections to people, what you share of yourself emotionally with other people. If you live with others, if you have a family that you connect to, this is going to be speaking quite directly to those connections. So these home and family ideals are developing, they are growing, they are evolving. This is all quite beneficial when we're dealing with a trine between Jupiter and Neptune. These are pretty beneficial planets. They tend to offer a lot of opportunity. They tend to, especially when they're in connection to each other, offer a sense of like unlimited growth. So whichever way you're needing for that to go in order to feel like you have a sense of growth, that's probably the way that it's going to go. If there's a complication with a family financial commitment, you may find a way out of that. So it's not just that there's going to be a growth and deepening of financial commitments or things like that. If there's a commitment that you need to step away from or that you need to fulfill and move on from in order to have a sense of personal growth, for instance, if there's a lack of trust in a specific connection or something like this, then as far as that goes, you're likely to find opportunities, little serendipitous openings for you to be able to close that out, right? So it's beneficial more so than it is approving of or deepening of. Now, on the other hand, it is likely that whatever's going on in this area of your life, again, the emotional commitments and connections, things like this, people who feel like family, whatever's going on this front through this period of time, at the very least down the road, it should set you up for being able to trust and develop deeper connections and commitments with people. But again, I don't want to like hammer this down as that's something that's happening tomorrow. That may not be the case. It may be that you're needing to work through a little bit of uncertainty now in order to get yourself to the sense of inspiration along these lines. And what do you want for your emotional commitments to look like? What are you looking for in your relationships with people? What are you looking for in terms of what makes you feel safe to be vulnerable with people? What develops your trust? Rather than people just saying, oh, trust me, obviously that's not the way to do that. What does that really look like to you? So hopefully what this can help with is giving you a sense of clarity along those lines, come what may. If it means you need to step away from a connection that you are dependent upon or vice versa, but that you do not trust, then that's the benefit, right? And that can help you, of course, again, down the road with opening you up to better connections. So there is a huge amount of growth there through sharing, through vulnerability, through trust and healing. But you may need to do that first with yourself if that area is a little bit messy as it stands. Additionally, you may have some really wonderful opportunities around investments. I always preach caution, especially with the like crazy weird economy that we have right now. But there may be something that you are able to get approved if there is like a loan that you're needing, or if there is an investment you're needing to make. If you are wanting to share what you are able to with other people, then that is wonderful. Again, I always, on a very rational level, preach a lot of caution when it comes to the management of your own material resources and things like that. Try and be discerning, of course, but you may be in a position to be able to help someone out. And if that's the case, then maybe doing so without strings attached would be a wonderful way to engage in that without needing to depend on trust and so forth. And, you know, you may actually have something really wonderful come through here that helps you to develop a sense of inspiration and trust if you do offer a grant that winds up getting repaid, for instance. That actually would not terribly surprise me with these alignments here. If that extra level of, okay, you didn't even need to pay me back, but you did, kind of trust. So those kinds of ideals about how you would like to connect with and serve others and feel like that is reciprocal, I think is going to wind up playing into this quite a bit. Now, additionally, this trine here on the material level is offering these change makers. So Pluto tends to bring a sense of deep transformation, which can play out over time through like purging and clarifying and resilience and empowerment and so forth. And then Uranus can shift things up in order to give you a sense of greater freedom and independence and liberation. And so these two on the material level does indicate that there will be shifts and changes within your working life, your responsibilities, how you are spending your money, your time, your effort, your energy. Are you pouring that into your work? Are you doing that in a healthy way? Are you doing that maybe a little bit too much at times that Uranus might start to raise some questions about, hey, man, we're really pouring all our energy into work and we're not really giving ourselves a lot of time to recharge and to just be human and to just value just being rather than always doing. So there may be something here about needing to look at that and change some of those routines or some of those habits of yours. Try to be a little bit more flexible with yourself. Maybe try and build in a little bit more flexibility to your routine so that you feel like you are able to exercise a bit more independence in what you're focusing on from moment to moment. Additionally, though, there may be changes, for instance, in your working life, more responsibilities maybe, or a shifted attitude toward responsibilities that is quite lucrative for you. So, for instance, this could be a change in your role, like a promotion or something like that, that comes with a raise attached to it. Or this could even be like a change in your attitude. You may feel like, if I want to make more, I have to work more. And that can be really self-limiting in terms of we only have so much energy. So when we are locked in at a certain rate and we think like, oh, I need to work harder and harder to make that grow, you may actually be able to be more efficient or to delegate more efficiently or to develop that kind of like teamwork ethic that enables you to carry or claim those talents, those skills, those personal resources of, again, delegation and leadership and things like this, that do make what you're bringing to the table potentially more valuable for yourself in particular. So yeah, I would expect changes when it comes to your finances and what it is that you're doing for work. Try and remain flexible when it comes to that. Try and remain open to potentially quite lucrative opportunities that are available to you. This could even have you deciding to invest some of your energy in a side hustle that you're wanting to have take over if you are wanting to work independently in the future as well. So try not to be shy to take first steps on that. Take that leap of faith. Not so much like quitting your job and then trying to do that. I always would recommend like try and get the ball rolling before you make any sort of drastic changes. And this would enable you to do that, certainly. Additionally, what's fascinating here is that you have Uranus and Gemini in the 6th, and then you have Jupiter up in the 8th house as well. So you may actually find yourself doing some pretty fantastic research or digging into things like investigating things. You may be sussing out some really wonderful opportunities for yourself through sheer digging into it, research, and looking into what's lucrative, what's paying well, what's available in the area, talking to people, being willing to ask those questions of what do I need to do to make things more valuable to me? Where can I apply my work ethic more effectively? You may even find yourself quite fascinated with financial research. So trying to learn more about financial industries and investments and things like this so that you feel like you are able to maybe develop more resources passively. That's one thing I wouldn't be surprised with Jupiter going through your 8th house and connecting with Pluto in your 2nd house. If Jupiter is digging up or presenting to you or having you nicely run into some opportunities for passive income as well, some of that can be investing. So you may be learning about that quite a bit as well. Maybe some of this even has to do with real estate. But yeah, I think that's a lot of what I have for you, Capricorn. It's a fascinating combination. There's a lot of possibilities for this, a lot of room for growth, and a lot of personal resilience and an ability to create wiggle room for yourself, to create more independence for yourself, to develop a lot of resources. One thing with Jupiter that I'll just kind of throw out here lastly is Jupiter and Pluto, when they get together, they speak to wealth, and they are in these wealth houses of yours. They're transiting through these and connecting to each other along these lines. So I would not be surprised if this is one of those major pivotal years when it comes to availing yourself to more income. So that is something that I think is quite pleasant about these alignments. But yeah, just to clarify as well, this very nice, beautiful symmetrical alignment at 4 degrees, this is going to be perfecting in late July. Jupiter will stay in this area and all these planets will stay in these signs and in these houses of yours from the summer of 26 to the summer of 27. So we're pretty much dealing with the same story. It's just developing out further. And then Jupiter will move on from that point, summer of 27, but we will continue to have this configuration, which is called a minor grand trine, between Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto here for several years to come. And I just discussed that in a recent video, so I will link to that in the related videos section in the description and in the pinned comment if you want to dig into that a little bit more. But yeah, that is pretty much what I have for you, Capricorn. I do hope that this transit treats you super well, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Aquarius, we have the basket aspect pattern developing across your first, third, fifth, and seventh houses. So for you, this is going to be fundamentally about your social connections as well as personal expression. One of the biggest parts of this is going to be the fact that Pluto in your first house is going to be aspected by all these other planets. So you've been going through in recent years this internal transformation about how you carry yourself, about your personal goals, developing confidence and resilience. And it could feel like some of your social life, some of the opportunities available to you to express yourself more openly are coming together to reinforce that through this period of time. So let's start with the fact that Jupiter is going to be moving into your seventh house, and it's going to be opposing that Pluto. So you could find that there's a lot of growth available to you through your partnerships with other people, through connecting with others, through conversation. So you may even feel like there are people that you're connected with that are either impressive to you and therefore calling you to kind of raise the bar yourself as well to meet them there. Learning through that experience that you can meet that energy there, that you can utilize this Pluto to kind of empower yourself relative to the people that you're connecting to as well. And you may even be surprised with how people are approaching you. So this Jupiter out here, it is quite gregarious, it's quite open, it is quite excitable, it's quite ready to receive whatever it's seeing and to affirm and reinforce that. And so it's looking right at that Pluto in your first house. So you may be somewhat surprised with the way that people seem to be perceiving your power, perceiving the changes that you've been going through, the evolution that you've been going through over recent years, and feeding that back to you. So through being met in that energy, this can bring that more into your own conscious mind as well. A recognition of how far you've come, a recognition of what you're capable of at this point. So it's through that direct connection to other people that you're likely to see the most growth, that you're likely to develop a lot of confidence in your ability to develop beneficial partnerships, to cooperate, to collaborate with other people. This may even be, I mentioned that you may be trying to meet someone at what you perceive as their level, but this may also just be people encouraging you a lot to express yourself, to be open, to share of yourself, to have a greater influence over people. So you could see that developing over this coming year from July of 2026 to about July of 2027. One thing I will say specifically, and this is quite specific to July in particular of 2026, when they are exactly opposite to each other, there may be a little bit of drama or there may be a little bit of comparison, like over competition with someone else when they're really kind of staring each other down. But that Jupiter in your seventh is going to be helping over the coming year or so you to recognize where you're at this point. So in combination with that, we also have Neptune transiting through your third house and connecting with all of this. And your third house has to do with community, communications, the people, places, things around you, your conscious mind and conscious thought process as well, how you communicate, with whom you're communicating. So there's a lot of optimism between these two. The seventh house, of course, being the other people that you're directly tied to. The third house can be broader than that, like, again, your community. So we see that there's a lot of excitement, a lot of openness to that. These are both quite beneficial, quite idealistic energies. So you may be kind of dreaming up, what kinds of people do I want to connect with? How do I want for my community to feel? There may be a lot here about a sense of belonging that you haven't felt for some time coming back to you. Feeling really idealistic about the impact that you can have on your community. So maybe wanting to utilize some of this growth that you've gone through in order to benefit others as well, specifically through cooperation, collaboration, sense of community. And you may feel that people are just approaching your ideas with more openness as well. So you're getting really excellent feedback. So to reiterate and kind of simplify this, these three here are working on your personal development and evolution, your growth being reflected positively back to you and even kindly back to you for the most part, from Neptune representing a sensitivity within your community and openness to your ideas within your community, getting good feedback there, as well as from your partners, so the people that you're dealing with directly. And what this feedback loop is creating is an opportunity to utilize this increased influence that you have toward proliferation of your connections, your relationships with people, a greater enjoyment of that, a greater sense of affirmation there, so feeling less inhibited, as well as a sense of belonging. And even further, we have this really nice support of Uranus transiting through your fifth house. So this is the place of your self-expression, your creativity, your interests, your hobbies, your pleasures, your joys. And what we see with Uranus there is a lot of novelty, so new interests, as well as a sense of liberation. So feeling free to love what you love, enjoy what you enjoy, and not feeling the need to like get approval for that from others, for instance. So this is also uninhibiting you, which is just really wonderful because of Pluto moving through the first house. Sometimes this can feel a little overwhelming of putting you in new positions and so forth, but Uranus is going to help you to take that a little bit less seriously, such that you're able to grow into that more comfortably and embrace who you're becoming more and embrace a more authentic version of yourself and help you then to utilize that Pluto in your first house, that personal transformation into kind of a truer version of yourself. So like I said, there's a lot here along the lines of your social life and who you're connecting to, a lot of idealism around that, as well as your self-expression and your sense of self. So there's a strong renewal, a change in your sense of self here, such that you're able to feel more comfortable really being yourself, showing yourself for who you are, and allowing for others to meet you there. So this further winds up reinforcing your sense of belonging because you're not trying to meet people where they're at and hiding certain aspects of yourself. You're kind of waving your own banner and letting those that align with that come to you, even developing a sense of community around that. What's interesting about this trine as well is that sometimes we can feel a strong sense of responsibility and like we need to grow up, and we wind up pushing down the inner child. We wind up what we perceive of as growing out of that. But as Pluto's coming through and empowering you, what Uranus is saying is now that you are in this position of having authority over yourself and control over yourself, you can now reclaim those aspects of yourself, maybe from your youth or from a more excitable version of yourself, re-embrace those and reinfuse those back into your personality. So those being the breakthroughs in personal enjoyment and expression. You may also find that there's this creativity that's bubbling up within you, especially between these two down here. The fifth house being creativity and the third house being a sense of like verbal expression. You may even find yourself writing more or speaking up more or wanting to learn or teach creatively. So you may be taking on more personal expressive projects. And I can only encourage that with all this. You're likely to learn a lot about yourself through that process as well. Additionally, if you have children or you're thinking about having children, they could wind up playing into this whole situation a lot as well. So the fifth house also does have to do with your children or the children around you. And the way that this is configured is pointing out a really excellent influence that you can have on young people around you to encourage them to be uninhibited, to explore their interests, to be really authentic and not worry so much about, again, the approval of others, etc. So yeah, it's just a really wonderful set of alignments here that are really encouraging you to connect with others, to get out there, to express yourself openly, to lean into a sense of belonging. And through that process, develop a huge amount of personal confidence and resilience, knowing that you are appreciated for what you're bringing to the table. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Aquarius. So I do hope that these alignments are wonderful for you. I think they will be. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right. So for Pisces, we have this basket pattern developing across your second, fourth, sixth, and 12th houses. So this is a really fascinating combination here. What we see is there's these kind of two components here of a lot of internal, deep personal transformation and change when it comes to your private life and your internal life. And that is combined here with a sense of kind of unlimited growth and a lot of potential and a lot of optimism when it comes to your material life, your financial life, your resources, as well as your daily routines and responsibilities and things like this. So it's fascinating. Things seem to be going smoothly on the material front. And that is combined then with a sense of deep internal change. So there's a lot of emotional clearing that is implied here. Pluto is going through your 12th house and it's kind of clearing that out. It is purging the subconscious, it is purging you of patterns of behavior, habits that you may not want to deal with, personal, like psychological conditioning from when you were young, the sense of what you expect life to be before you even meet it, you know? So all of that like internal monologue, internal perspective about things, that is undergoing a major purge, clearing, cleansing. You may find that you are developing a lot of internal resilience as well, a lot of psychological and emotional resilience with Pluto being there. Recognizing when you are kind of more efficient in this area, or you're not holding on to old things, old memories, old cycles, old ties and bonds and things like that, that you're able to move forward with a greater sense of lightness. You may also find that there's a spiritual quality to this. So it may feel like you are more deeply spiritually connected. You may find that your spiritual experiences are a lot more profound, that the meaning of your life is coming through in a deeper way or in a more intense way as well. So clarifying to you what's deeply meaningful to you and almost getting to know yourself on that internal level more. So this renewed depth of connection with yourself and who you are deep down, your true self. And that's going to be going on behind the scenes. These are very private houses. The fourth house has to do with your home, your family, your private life, your roots, your sense of emotional security and groundedness in this life. And Uranus is coming through here and it's shaking that up, but it's also liberating you along these lines. So with these two working together, any sort of, like I said, family conditioning, the roles that you played growing up, any limitations that come from that don't really stand much of a chance with that trine between Uranus trying to free you from that at the root of your chart and then Pluto going through the 12th house and purging that on a subconscious mind kind of a level. So that is pretty fascinating and cool. There may be like moments of heightened emotion about that. Like, again, sometimes when we recognize those patterns, there can almost be this sense of like frustration or melancholy about having stayed in that mode for so long and finally recognizing that it wasn't necessary, or recognizing the root of that can be a little, tinged with a bit of frustration about lost time or something like that. But overall, this should be really liberating and quite wonderful along those lines. So that's what's going on under the surface for you. And through a lot of those changes, it's likely that you're going to see a huge amount of potential developing for you on a material level. So Jupiter and Neptune, especially when they get together, they point to growth. They point to an opportunity or a lot of opportunities for pretty massive expansion. And you may feel like you are more clear on what you personally value, what you enjoy when it comes to responsibilities, what genuinely is your responsibility and maybe what's not. That may be a major factor here as well. It's like releasing the responsibilities of other people, not feeling like you need to look for the impact that you are having on others' lives for a sense of value in your own life, but rather being able to do kind works, to do good works, and to show people a sense of sympathy, but without feeling like that's somehow a necessity for you to do, or that it's your responsibility, or that the burden, the onus of that is placed upon you naturally, right? So then we can build up some resentments around that. So the enjoyment of work and the sense of unlimited personal potential and unlimited personal growth of your resources on a material level, on an emotional and an energetic level, especially when you're saving a lot of that energy for things that you truly care about, that you truly value, your willingness to define your own values for yourself and not look to the acknowledgement or recognition or approval of other people for what you value. Having Pisces, you're not that terribly materialistic, generally speaking, right? And so with Neptune coming through here, it's probably going to be giving you a sense of permission to not be overly materialistic and to allow for that to come in through a sense of luck and good timing like it naturally does for Pisces people. So the optimism that you're carrying about where you stand and what you're capable of is going to help you a lot. And also leaning toward what you love to do. So try and figure out, like, what is that enjoyable work? What is that ideal routine for you? What does that look like? And how do you create more of that? How do you lean toward that more? Maybe there's something here about desiring greater personal freedom on a lot of levels, and maybe freedom of your work, like going independent or something like that, is going to underpin some of that. So maybe you are wanting to completely shake up where you're living, how you're living, what you are personally valuing. So this could be a willingness to like take a pay cut in order to feel like you are more free in your own life and that you're able to lean into the enjoyable work more. And you may actually find that there's a lot of material growth that develops from doing that as well over the longer term, because Neptune's going to be in your second house for a while. Additionally, looking at your health, so not just on the emotional, psychological, spiritual level, but also looking at how all of that can impact your physical health and vice versa. So sometimes when we're not feeling so great or we're not in our like optimal physical shape, that can also impact our sense of what we're capable of, and that can start to have us holding ourselves in or holding ourselves back. But again, the emotional and the spiritual, the psychological can also impact our sense of even optimism about your daily routine. So like, what attitude do you bring to your work? Do you feel like you get a lot out of it? Do you feel like you're pushing yourself, just, all right, let's just get through the day in and day out kind of a thing? If that's the case, this is going to help with that immensely. And I would really intend for that to be an outcome of this, is to get out of the, I'm just getting through the day, I'm just getting through the week, I'm just getting through the month. Because there's an endless opportunity between all of these placements to get yourself out of that kind of a rut. Now, additionally, you have this sextile between Neptune and Uranus across your second and your fourth houses. These together can speak quite literally to property, like real estate. You may be interested in either buying or selling. This Uranus could have you looking into some unconventional living situations as well. So for instance, this could be like selling a home to live in an apartment, or leaving apartment living to go nomadic. Or this could be like living with more people, living with friends, or living with family in a way that is kind of mutually beneficial or frees you all up materially a little bit more too. So if you feel like there's something that's kind of coming up that's a little unconventional, and maybe I haven't thought about things in this way for a little while, I wouldn't shy away from that just because it's unusual. You may actually find that a lot of your freedom in that is through the flexibility around your living arrangements. Additionally, like flip side of that, if you are in a living arrangement that feels too limiting or restrictive, like say you're living with specific people that you're not that fond of, or you are living in a place that you're not that fond of, you may find that serendipitously just the right kind of work and just the right kind of financial situations open up for you in order to effectuate that change as well. So keep your eye peeled and try and say yes to those kinds of things, because it may actually be quite profound in how that's able to free you. Additionally, with these two functioning as they are, they can be pretty intuitive together. We also then have, along these kind of intuitive, instinctive houses, the 4th and the 12th, we also have these other planets. So your intuition should be pretty on point, your instincts, your ability to discern things kind of out of the ether. And that's going to help you immensely along all these lines as well. So when it comes to your private life and having that look the way that you want it to, as well as your lifestyle, your public life, your material life. You may be able to intuit your way through that in a way that's extraordinarily beneficial to you. So, for instance, like sussing out opportunities, knowing what to say yes to, finding yourself in the right place at the right time intuitively in order to avail yourself to an opportunity that could change things for you in a way that you would really like. Additionally, with these two, Uranus and Pluto, these are, again, they're pretty behind the scenes. You may want to work on your own or work on things that are quite significant behind the scenes and not necessarily just yourself, but you may want to pull some of your work behind the scenes before you are presenting it. Like I said, this could even have you wanting to work from home or wanting to go independent. And there could be some unexpected developments along those lines. But again, this is likely to show up pretty serendipitously. So for instance, if you would like to work from home, but you live with someone where it's not possible, suddenly maybe I'm not living there anymore, something along those lines, or some property that you have. If you are wanting to sell and change up your lifestyle, you may be downsizing in order to free yourself up materially, in order to pivot toward work that you like more as well. But yeah, it's a fascinating combination here. I think it's going to be pretty magical and pretty cool for you. So I really do hope that you enjoy it. As I mentioned earlier in the video, though I know people jump to timestamps, so I want to cover the timing of this. This beautiful little symmetrical basket here, this alignment at 4 degrees, this is going to be in late July of 2026. However, all of these planets will be in the same houses, the same signs, including Jupiter, from the summer of 26 to the summer of 27. So we're pretty much just having the ball continues to keep rolling in this direction up until that point. And then we also have this component of the basket, this little minor grand trine here between Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. This is going to stay in effect until about 2030 and beyond. And so I did a different video about that, which I will link to in the description and in the pinned comment if you want to dig into that a little bit more. So yeah, that is what we're working with in terms of time frames. So yeah, that is what I have for you, Pisces. I do hope that you enjoy this transit, and thank you so much for spending this time with me.